The majestic palace towering above the surrounding landscape was illuminated by the stunningly beautiful and rich colors of the sunset. Before the ruler of a great state stood a loyal courtier patiently awaiting an important decision that could change the fate of the entire kingdom and its people. A handsome man with blonde hair and a ceremonial uniform decorated with gold embroidery sat on a majestic throne. He rested his head on his hand in boredom, looking into the distance with an expression of slight melancholy. It was Emperor Michael Sonnet de Brant, who by uttering one threatening word "pray" made everyone in the hall freeze in fear and awe. A courtman with gray hair, trembling with fear, bowed his head and stammering asked the ruler what exactly he meant by his threatening word. His face was pale and his voice trembled with emotion. The rest of the aristocrats, gripped by fear and excitement, watched in complete horror what was happening, not knowing what would happen next, and what the future fate of their kingdom would be. But at this moment the secretary of the royal person, Leticia Woods, with fiery red hair, loudly announced that the emperor had ordered an investigation into the Duke of Liscarella. Michael stood nearby, listening intently as a lady with fiery red hair read out the sentence to the criminal. Suddenly the girl froze and her face turned pale when she heard a new word from the emperor. "See." The secretary calmly and clearly explained to all the subjects present that His Majesty had issued a decree on a large-scale reorganization of the navy. The nobles, gripped by indescribable horror, stood motionless as if spellbound, and their faces reflected deep shock. Everyone present understood the seriousness of what was happening. Leticia, with determination and cold clarity, said that in the event of a military conflict with the kingdom of Tetun, their fleet would be ready for decisive action, even to the point of sinking enemy ships. The aristocrats, in low voices, discussed their recent meeting with the ruler, noting that this time there were no executions. The gentlemen tried to be careful in their statements, especially after the horrifying sight of the chancellor's severed head. If it were not for a girl who worked as a secretary in the palace and was distinguished by her friendly and diplomatic manner of communicating with other courtiers, the empire would probably have been on the verge of collapse long ago. As Michael and the lady left the hall, the nobles tried to understand how someone like her of humble birth could order executions and influence the fate of the nobles, while the emperor did not say a word. Another one joined the group of men, warning them to keep their voices down, otherwise their talk of gossip could lead to trouble. While others were discussing her only influence that could understand the intentions of the ruler of the empire, Leticia was pleasantly communicating with a young courtier. Her easy and friendly manner of communication attracted attention. Walking with a gentleman, Leticia Woods, who had been in her position for about 10 years, seemed completely unaware of how much power and influence she actually had. Clutching her head, the girl felt deep fatigue. In recent days, Leticia has been working tirelessly and spending too much time at work, which has finally made itself felt. The concerned man, seeing that Woods was clearly exhausted from the constant flow of work and tireless workload, sincerely offered his help. Leticia Woods politely declined assistance, explaining that without her personal supervision, the work would not be completed properly. The lady believed that only careful leadership and control could guarantee the accuracy and quality of tasks. He wanted to express his respect, but the lady turned away as her attention was focused on important matters. Women did not have enough patience for empty chatter. In parting, waving to each other, they went about their business, each immersed in their own worries and responsibilities. Leticia walked through the empty hall, plunged into darkness. Silence surrounded her, and only these steps disturbed the peace-creating, echoing sounds in this darkness. Sighing with relief, the girl was glad for the silence and calm that came after intense meetings and heated discussions. Stumbling and almost losing her balance, the lady was on the verge of falling, but at that moment Michael appeared out of nowhere. He quickly grabbed her arm deftly and confidently supporting her, preventing her from falling. Trying to cheer up Woods, the emperor smiled encouragingly, hoping that his kind gesture and warm smile would help dispel all doubts and fatigue. The man said the word "stable," to which Leticia asked not to pay attention to it, since she had already rested enough and was ready to continue her business. Having awkwardly adjusted her papers, the girl showed them to the ruler with slight embarrassment, trying to concentrate on the review process. Closing the door behind him, Mikhail, with a serious expression on his face, pronounced the new word needle. His voice, filled with hidden meaning, seemed to emphasize the importance of this term and its meaning in the current situation. No one could have imagined that a person with such a harmless and sweet face could cause fear not only within the empire, but throughout the entire continent. When the man ascended the throne, he stained the imperial palace with blood, after countless nobles were executed. This brutal reign led to the king being called a bloodthirsty tyrant. This charismatic, handsome man turned out to be the most cruel and uncompromising ruler in the entire history of the empire. Leticia's heart broke every time she had to announce someone's execution, because it meant that she was actually taking someone's life. When the emperor said something about the cat, the lady, despite the offer to sit down, resolutely remained standing. The lady did not allow herself to relax or deviate from strict standards of behavior, preferring to remain steadfast and respectful. Looking down and lost in her thoughts, Leticia realized that it was time to confess something deeply important and personal. Closing her eyes from excitement and internal tension, the secretary decisively and loudly declared that she intended to resign from her position in the near future. Therefore, Wood strongly suggested that the search for a new candidate to fill the vacant position be immediately initiated, recognizing that this was necessary to maintain smooth operations. At this moment, unexpectedly, the emperor gently hugged the girl and pressed her to himself, as if trying to give comfort and support in difficult times. For the first time in his entire life, Mikhail, showing vulnerability, asked the girl not to leave him. The man's voice trembled with emotion, and his request conveyed a deep need for support and intimacy. The lady raised her head in bewilderment, trying to comprehend how this could happen. Surprise and confusion were visible in the bright eyes. When Leticia began to lose consciousness, the emperor screamed her name in complete panic, as if in an attempt to awaken her from the impending darkness which seemed to encircle her with its cold shadows. Hugging his beloved by the shoulders, Mikhail sadly looked down at her. His gaze was filled with longing and tenderness, so he tried to convey to her all his deepest pain and immeasurable love, which he could not express in words. The luxurious room was exquisitely furnished, every detail testifying to the wealth and taste of the owner. Magnificent draperies, antique furniture, and decorative items created an atmosphere in which elegance reigned. The emperor's secretary, waking up on the pillow, opened her golden eyes filled with curiosity and a gentle radiance. One small gesture allowed her to sit up in bed as she began to awaken. These movements were smooth and graceful, like those of a person just returning from sleep. Next to her, in complete peace and patience, sat Mikhail, waiting for the moment when the lady would finally awaken from her deep sleep, so that he could once again greet the lady's awakening with affectionate attention. While Leticia was trying to figure out where she was, the emperor leaned towards her, touching his face to hers. The girl touched her forehead with her palm, and thus the man was able to check the temperature, making sure that everything was in order, and assessing the condition with slight concern. Before the aristocrat could leave the office, Leticia made an attempt to stop him, hoping that her intervention could change the outcome of the situation. However, he only replied that they would discuss what had happened later, and leaving the sweet girl with disturbing thoughts, quickly left the room. The door slammed shut, leaving only one person in the room, sitting alone on the bed, surrounded by sudden silence. Looking out the window, Leticia thought about how her life would have turned out if she had never met the emperor, and how much her fate and future would have changed. After all this happened 11 years ago, when the moonlight gently touched the top of the mountains and through the foliage of the forest, giving the night scene an amazing and magical glow. The girl, yawning and gradually waking up from a night's sleep, settled comfortably on the bed, gathering with the last remnants of her strength to greet the new day with slight excitement and hope. The little girl, with a quick and deft movement of her hands, tied an apron on an old dress, giving her outfit a neat look. The soup was almost ready. A lot of juicy vegetables were already floating in it, and the aromatic water, saturated with their taste, promised a delicious result. Knocking on her parents' door, young Leticia, with a slight smile and warmth in her voice, carefully announced that it was time to wake up and start a new day. The sleepy peasants, yawning and clumsily rubbing their eyes, reluctantly rose from the bed, their fatigue visible in every movement. They expressed their sincere gratitude to the girl for the wonderful breakfast she prepared, deeply appreciating her care and effort put into this morning treat. The only dissatisfied person among everyone was a young guy who did not like cabbage soup and refused to eat it despite the efforts of everyone around him. When asked about her grandmother's well-being, Leticia replied that she brought food directly to her room, trying to provide the comfort and care necessary for a full recovery. Moreover, after she took the basket, it was time for the girl to leave the place, saying goodbye to her family and friends, which was a very touching moment. A middle-aged man opening his new grocery store noticed the girl and joyfully greeted her, addressing the little visitor with warmth and friendliness. The old ladies, showing sincere interest and warm curiosity, asked Woods if she was going to go to the mountains again. Hearing positive agreement in response, they exchanged glances with enthusiasm. Laughing, the ladies noted with approval that the parents must be proud of their daughter who worked so hard and strived for her goals. These words slightly confused the girl, who was the only person capable of helping her family in difficult times. A huge responsibility lay on the woman's shoulders, and all her diligence was directed towards supporting her loved ones. Local residents were sincerely jealous of Woods's parents, dreaming that their own children could have the same outstanding qualities and aspirations. With enthusiasm and determination, Leticia made an important decision that day to make the most of her time and collect as many herbs as possible. Suddenly it started to rain and evening came, but the girl continued to collect plants, working hard, despite the worsening weather conditions. With her breath, she tried to warm her frozen palms, which were roughened and covered with abrasions after a long stay in the cold and working in difficult conditions. It was still too early to go home, as there were only 3 blades of grass in the basket. With diligence, the little girl began to look for new plants among the herbs, hoping to find more and fill the basket to the brim. Tears began to flow from the girl's yellow eyes from the realization of her own helplessness. The lady understood that it was also not easy for her parents, and this feeling deeply wounded her fragile heart. As a result, a small but very important bundle of drugs was delivered home, which, although it turned out to be insufficient to fully meet the needs, still played a key role in the ongoing treatment. The mother, gently patting her daughter on the head, said with a warm smile that everything was fine, assuring her that all the problems had been solved and there was nothing to worry about. There was a dispute with the father. The man claimed that the amount of medicine delivered was insufficient and also expressed serious concern about the catastrophic lack of funds. Leticia woke up in the forest in the pouring rain, barely comprehending what had just happened. She couldn't tell whether it was a dream or a vision. Hearing a terrible noise and ominous sounds, the girl immediately remembered the hunters' stories about how terrible bears and ferocious animals lived in the forest, which gave her goosebumps to the bone. Frightened to the core, the girl closed her eyes, pressing her hands tightly to her face as if trying to hide from everything terrible that was happening around, and find at least a small amount of consolation in this gesture. The basket overturned, and Leticia, falling on the grass, asked herself in surprise what had just happened, not understanding how she ended up in such an unexpected situation. A handsome boy in expensive clothes with blonde hair and sad eyes that made her want to know what was hidden behind his sadness appeared in front of her. Sitting in the rain, the little girl looked at the boy with curiosity and bewilderment, and unable to resist, inquired what he was doing here in such weather. When asked where the child's parents were, the guy only awkwardly looked away and froze in silence, clearly having difficulty finding an appropriate answer. The aristocrat's son did not answer any of the subsequent questions, so Leticia suggested that he might possibly be deaf, given his complete silence. The girl began to show with gestures that this place was extremely dangerous, thereby surprising the boy, who had not expected such an urgent demonstration of risk. Noticing the expensive things around Woods, couldn't help but ask if this man had really run away from his parents. Such items could indicate an unusual or even extraordinary history of his life. The guy continued to torment him with questions which caused the girl to sigh heavily as her patience was running out. Fear ran through the aristocrat's entire body as if every cell of his body was reacting to an invisible threat shaking him from head to toe. Gently, the older girl invited the boy to go home together, explaining that evil bears lived in the forest. Continuing to stay in such a place could be extremely dangerous. Together they began to run, and despite their desire to get away as quickly as possible, the rain only intensified, becoming more intense and persistent. Unable to stay on her feet and stumbling, Leticia fell to the ground along with the boy, and they found themselves on a wet and slippery surface, experiencing additional difficulty in moving. Remembering her basket, the girl began to look around in search, trying to notice the thing among the surrounding disorder and chaos. Only one blade of grass remained in the women's hands, surviving after a long and intense run, symbolizing the lady's perseverance and perseverance. From Woods's eyes, with the realization that it was impossible to make even one medicine from the remaining plant scraps, the last hope was destroyed. Suddenly, a hand with a handkerchief appeared, carefully wiping the tears from the lady's eyes, expressing care and sympathy at this difficult moment. This man with a scarf turned out to be the same boy who appeared in an unusual way in the forest. His unexpected appearance and concern for the lady was an unexpected and touching turn of events. Embarrassed, the girl began to laugh, her awkwardness gradually giving way to light amusement and relief when she realized how comical the situation was. Gently taking the boy's hands, the lady thanked the boy for his care, expressing her deep gratitude and touching gratitude. After that, she turned away from him and ordered herself to concentrate so as not to lose control of the situation and solve the problems that had arisen. Without thinking for long, the peasant woman decided not to return to the hill from which she had fallen, preferring to leave behind this unfavorable route and move forward to find a safer path. Suddenly, the boy pushed Woods aside, shouting for the maiden to be careful and thereby averting possible danger. It was a real shock and a complete surprise for the lady to learn that the boy who was found in the forest had the ability to speak, which seemed completely incredible. Leticia had just stood rapidly falling from a great height and causing a powerful crash that made the earth shake with a strong impact. The frightened girl, trembling with horror, looked intently in the direction where her short and not yet lived life could end, as if foreshadowing the inevitable. Joyfully hugging her savior, the girl, with a sincere feeling of gratitude, expressed all her gratitude to him, deeply touched by his selfless act and support. Wood's attention back to the basket. It was a trivial matter compared to more serious problems that required immediate resolution. Having introduced herself, she politely asked the boy's name. When he continued to remain silent, Leticia added that it's okay not to reveal your name if you're embarrassed. Night fell, and the situation became increasingly dangerous. The moon slowly rose into the sky, illuminating the dark spaces and creating a mystical atmosphere around. With an awkward expression on his face, the boy reiterated that it was extremely dangerous to remain on the street. Woods was deeply impressed by this statement. The guy, overwhelmed with emotions, rushed to hug the girl, who did not leave him alone in the forest, despite the dangers and difficulties. These hugs were full of sincere gratitude and a deep sense of appreciation. The peasant woman, watching the stranger begin to shiver from the cold, slowly and reluctantly takes off her old threadbare clothes to try to help him cope with the cold. Having lost the ability to utter more than one word, the aristocrat, with difficulty squeezing out only this short but meaningful word, could barely utter the name, Cerberus. A bright and amazing image of a dog with 3 heads appeared in the memory of the girl with red hair, which left a deep imprint on her imagination. With a feeling of deep frustration and dissatisfaction, the boy slowly and carefully began to take off his old cape, accompanying each movement with a heavy sigh. Instead of throwing the item to the floor, the guy decisively threw it over himself, and Woods demonstrating his determination and confidence in this act. Together under a cozy blanket, they nestled near the rocks under the cover of darkness, hiding from the coolness and enjoying each other's warm comfort. Smiling happily and filling her speech with sincere warmth, Leticia complimented her companion with particular delight, calling the aristocrat smart. Her gaze expressed deep admiration and gratitude. Uncomfortably embarrassed, the boy admitted that this was his first experience of this kind. The girl, catching a hint of excitement, guessed that no one in her life had ever called the nobleman smart. Leticia easily understood her new acquaintance at a glance, as if their conversation was a continuation of something that had begun long ago. Nevertheless, the lady could not leave the feeling of déjà vu, as if she had once met a person very similar to him. The events took place some time ago in a small village located near a forest where the surrounding nature and solitude created a special atmosphere. A dissatisfied guy with freckles on his cheeks expressed his indignation at the cabbage soup, which in his opinion turned out to be far from so tasty. Leticia, noticing that the acquaintance was clearly dissatisfied with the taste of the soup, cautiously asked what exactly was missing, suggesting that perhaps there was not enough salt or some other ingredient in the dish. From his place, the peasant sharply declared that Woods should eat this tasteless liquid herself, while taking away part of the bread that belonged to the girl. This demand sounded rude and unpredictable. Preparing to bite into a piece of pastry, the boy ordered his housemate to sit quietly and not disturb him, to concentrate on his studies so that nothing would distract him from his important task. The girl remained hungry without waiting for food to be offered to her, because suddenly a loud scream was heard, which broke the silence and attracted the attention of everyone present in the room. Peering out from behind the door with obvious concern on her face, Woods carefully asked what could have happened so important and serious that it caused such anxious and wary attention from her grandmother. The elderly woman confidently declared that it would definitely rain today. These words, filled with life experience and wisdom, were full of confidence in the upcoming change in the weather. The stern and angry woman watched with a clear expression of displeasure as her granddaughter, clearly reluctant and with a slight feeling of irritation, went to the window to close it. The wicked old lady with piercing eyes screamed at the poor girl, calling her stupid and ridiculous. My grandmother had severe joint pain. The upset woman began to sob and complain, claiming that no one in the family needed her and felt like just a burden. The words and tears seemed to be an attempt to arouse sympathy and pity for her suffering among those around her. Leticia, succumbing to the old woman's actions and imbued with suffering, hurried to her to give her a massage, hoping in this way to relieve the pain and demonstrate her concern. The adult Woods, recalling these events, realized that the boy sitting next to her was significantly different from the relative from her past. Sitting next to him, the boy showed extraordinary kindness and care, which stood out from the others. A sincere and sensitive attitude towards others created a feeling of special warmth and attention. Morning came, and the sleeping couple were awakened by loud screams, in which the name of Mr. Mikhail was repeatedly called. These shrill and persistent sounds disturbed their sleep, causing them to become alert and identify the source of the disturbance. The girl tried to find out from her new acquaintance whether he had run away from home, but he continued to remain silent without revealing the slightest hint of an answer. Whispering in the guy's ear, Leticia carefully asked if the guy was a nobleman, maintaining an intonation of complete politeness and interest. Waving her hand in the air, Woods gave a clear and expressive sign to the people located on the hill, informing them that the aristocrat they were expecting was below on the lower platform. Turning her face to the boy, the lady sternly told him to immediately return home and no longer create any cause for concern for his parents, so that they would not worry in vain. A rope lay quietly on the ground, covered with green grass, its rough texture contrasting sharply with the soft carpet of vegetation, creating a surprising and slightly strange combination. The aristocrats took the boy with them, deeply concerned about his condition and future, trying to ensure safety and comfort despite all unforeseen circumstances. One of the aristocrats approached the girl and, showing kindness and attention, asked her name, trying to establish contact and get to know the little lady better. Approaching her, the man expressed his sincere gratitude to Woods for the heroic rescue of the young master, noting his courage and dedication in this difficult moment. In the forest among the green trees, There was already a luxurious carriage decorated with exquisite ornaments and surrounded by many different things ready for a trip or an important event. Leticia was deeply amazed when looking around, she realized that an impressive crowd of people had gathered around her. There were so many of them, and they all excitedly discussed the fate of their young master. Noble people stood aside surrounded by a special aura of greatness and dignity which emphasized their status and evoked involuntary respect. The confused and depressed peasant woman slowly sank to the cold ground, realizing with pain in her soul that her existence was so insignificant to those around her that if she suddenly disappeared, no one would notice her absence. Lowering her head onto her knees, the girl quietly curled up into a small ball, trying to hide from the outside world and find at least a little solace in this secluded corner. Suddenly, the nobleman's clear voice was heard and the baby was called out. Mikhail looked at her with a warm smile on his face as if he wanted to reassure and support her. Sticking his hand into his jacket, the boy tensely felt the inside pocket, clearly trying to feel for something important. These movements were uncertain but full of determination, as if his fate depended on what he found. Having handed over the precious thing to the girl, he looked at her carefully and with a deep sigh uttered the word grave, as if this word contained all the heaviness and significance of the moment. Leticia realized with surprise that he wanted her to bury the precious gift in the ground, as if this act contained special meaning or symbolism. One of the guards reminded the rich man that it was time to go home, and his words sounded like a gentle but persistent reminder to end the evening and return to normal life. In parting, Mikhail gave Woods one last look, full of tenderness, and smiled tenderly, as if he was trying to convey all his warm feelings and indelible impressions of the meeting. Leticia, sensing the warmth and friendliness in the response, greeted the young stranger from a wealthy family who was standing nearby with a slight and graceful movement of her hand. While the carriage slowly moved forward, the girl watched with interest as it gradually disappeared from view, disappearing over the horizon. The baby, despite her anxiety and fear, did not lose hope, sincerely believing that her parents, who no doubt were very worried about the disappearance of their daughter. At first, she wanted to sell the trinket for a lot of money, but after that she changed her mind and hid it in the pocket of her old clothes. Then, feeling uncomfortable and anxious, she headed towards her house. The boy, enjoying the ride in luxury transport, could not get rid of the obsessive thought of whether they would meet again. A whole year has passed. The girl's parents, absorbed in their own affairs, turned to her with a request for help. They asked her to look after her grandmother and brother in order to provide them with proper care in their absence. Woods was 14 years old, and while scrubbing the floors with a washcloth, she thought thoughtfully about the sick old lady and her stupid brother, who had still not been able to pass important exams. Parents, despite the situation, continued to shift all the housework to their daughter, not paying attention to her difficulties and worries. Looking at the decoration that Mikhail gave last year, the girl thought about how she would like to go to the mountains as soon as possible, to enjoy the fresh air and the tranquility of nature. Having finished work, Leticia strained her sore back and, feeling tired, decided to go home to rest and recuperate. Unexpectedly for the little girl, the beginning of rain attracted her attention, and she watched with undisguised interest and childish delight as drops like sparkling crystals fell from the sky and crashed to the ground. Moreover, a few minutes later, a thunderstorm began thundering loudly across the sky while lightning flashed brightly and broke the dark haze. Covering her hair with her palm, the peasant woman fled in panic, trying to hide from the incessant downpour which was pouring like buckets, and to avoid getting completely wet to the last thread. With horror, the lady realized that lightning was about to strike right next to her, and her heart began to beat in a panicky rhythm from fear of the approaching elements. Trembling with fear, she barely had time to dodge when the lightning struck the ground nearby with a deafening crack, leaving behind a loud splash of discharges. A black mark from the lightning strike remained on the tree, clearly demonstrating the power and fury of the elements that swept past and left behind traces of its destructive presence. Deciding that it was time to pull herself together, Leticia concentrated and, with difficulty controlling her trembling fingers, reached out with her hand to pick up the fallen gift. As soon as the lady reached for the jewelry, another deafening thunder was heard which echoed in her chest, increasing her fear and anxiety. Wood sat on the ground, feeling her skin turn black and burnt like hot coal, leaving an unpleasant sensation of heat and pain. What was happening to her was so terrible and unreal that, losing consciousness, the little girl tried to understand whether it was just a nightmare or whether she was really losing consciousness. The last thing Leticia saw was the rainy forest plunged into darkness as if it was covering with its curtain, while consciousness slipped into endless darkness. A young girl was crossing the road when suddenly a bulky truck appeared in front of her at full speed, rushing down the road, leaving no time to react. With horror, the peasant woman realized that at that moment, her existence was on the brink, and she seemed to be reliving the moment when she had already left this world in a past life. All the events that took place seemed to be the plot of an exciting novel, which Leticia had recently absorbed with genuine interest and fascination. Leticia Woods was the tragically dead sister of a corrupt nobleman whom he used and manipulated even after her daughter became an adult and independent. Ultimately, the heroine died because of a family that never showed true love and support for her. Crying Leticia tried to deny everything, but something inside told her that this was a bitter truth that could not be ignored. After the rain, when the sky cleared again, an amazing rainbow appeared against its background, like a sparkling bridge connecting the rainy past with the clear present. Gloomily, the girl decided to change her future. The little girl was ready to live despite the difficulties and temporarily play along with her so-called family in order to achieve her goal. The main character's brother, after an exciting game of ball with friends, said goodbye to them, citing the fact that it was too late to continue the game and he needed to go home. The street boys were perplexed and asked why he did not help his sister, who works day and night to cope with all the affairs. Laughing, the guy asked why he should help his stupid sister if he would soon enter a prestigious academy, and this, in his opinion, was much more important. Standing in an old and dirty dress at the edge of the well, Leticia patiently collected clean water into a bucket, carefully leaning against the edge so as not to get dirty, and overcoming all difficulties with courage. Pushing his sister away with his hand, the boy commanded to step aside and not interfere, demonstrating his intolerance to her presence and wanting to act without interference. Irritated and with obvious dissatisfaction, Wood said that she urgently needed to wash off all the dirt that she had collected while working on the hill under the scorching sun. The future aristocrat, with undisguised arrogance, suggested that his sister cut her hair so that it would not interfere with work and would not look too untidy. And then the rude man added that the girl should prepare a more delicious dish than last time. He expressed his dissatisfaction with how her cooking skills did not meet his expectations. Leticia, showing courage and determination, answered her brother that she could not prepare a more delicious dish because she no longer wanted to be obedient and submit to stupid demands. The lady, citing poor health, told her brother that today she would go to bed early and would not cook. This statement outraged the guy, who was dissatisfied with the refusal to fulfill his duties. She added, with a hint of irony in her voice, that if her brother was really that smart, then it would be wise for him to take on the responsibility of cooking his own dinner. The girl sincerely hoped that the young man would not become a civil servant in the future and would not be among those who thoughtlessly managed the empire's money. In one swift and decisive movement, the bucket was thrown over Woods, and her dress instantly became cleansed, just as the peasant woman herself was washed from head to toe. Raising her head high and carefully removing the disturbing hair, she curiously asked if her brother still needed water from the bucket. The man, filled with malice and anger, showered her with accusations, calling her abnormal and crazy, and without hiding his contempt and irritation. As he left, he angrily promised not only to snitch on her, but also to tell his parents in detail about all her behavior, clearly intending to cause their anger and disappointment. The father and mother, having decided to have a serious conversation, opened the door to their daughter's chambers, intending to discuss with her all the accumulated problems and concerns. They complained and were angry, noting that their only daughter had treated her son rudely and behaved inappropriately towards her grandmother, which caused them deep indignation. Under the pressure of accusations and reproaches, Leticia was forced to apologize, admitting its mistakes and showing remorse for its inappropriate behavior. In a stern tone, the father said that although the girl was still very young, a difficult life awaited her in the future, and they were ready to forgive their daughter if she sincerely apologized to her relatives. Feeling that she was on edge, Woods cried out that she was incredibly tired of carrying out the responsibilities of the entire family, feeling the weight of all the responsibility falling on her. Unexpectedly, the mother hugged the baby tightly, trying to support and console her at this difficult moment, when the feelings of exhaustion and depression were especially acute. Calming the girl, the woman with great tenderness and care wiped away her tears with a handkerchief, trying to remove the heavy burden of worries and fear from her shoulders. However, the next moment the situation changed dramatically, when the mother urgently asked Woods to go and apologize to her brother and grandmother, demanding that she show courtesy and repentance. She asked if her daughter was angry, because this time the woman was not on her side and could not understand why her daughter was experiencing such anger and disappointment. The parents were deeply upset because they believed that Leticia had already matured and learned to cope with difficulties, but it turned out that the reality was completely different, and their expectations were not met. The man sternly ordered the girl to immediately apologize to the whole family, reminding her that the happy days of childhood were behind her, and now that Leticia had long grown up, she would have to face adult responsibilities. The irritated girl protested the injustice, saying that her brother should have at least tried to make something of himself in this life, instead of relying on others. The girl curiously asked her parents if any events had ever been held in this house, or if anything special had been done for her. Hugely upset by his daughter's behavior, the man, seeing how her actions become increasingly unacceptable and violate family norms, decides to take disciplinary measures. Leticia, noticing more than once that there was always a shortage of medicine, wondered how her parents managed this medicine and why its supplies were always so modest. Suddenly, in a fit of anger, the man slapped her sharply and without warning, which was a shocking and unpredictable act in this situation. The mother tried to calm her husband, who was angry with her daughter for asking too many questions, not understanding how curiosity and the desire for knowledge could cause such a storm of emotions. As a result, Woods was punished until she changed her behavior, and only correction became a condition for ending disciplinary action. The upset girl tried to change something, but all her efforts were useless. Therefore, clenching her fists in despair, the lady begged for forgiveness from the so-called family. Trying to play the role of despair, Leticia stated that she did not know what was happening to her, and this was the only way to express her feelings and hope for the understanding of others. The mother immediately rushed to her daughter and reassured her, saying that everything was fine as long as she continued to work every day despite the difficulties and worries. Wiping away fake tears, Woods said that from now on she will try her best to keep the family happy and secure, despite the difficulties and personal sacrifices. The father, putting his hand on his daughter's shoulder, suggested that she consider finding another job to help the family cope with financial difficulties and secure their future. The brother, passing by, smiled slyly and with slight disdain called his sister stupid, which clearly showed his superiority and dissatisfaction. The next day, Wood's parents saw her off, giving her a suitcase full of things necessary for the further journey. Saying goodbye to her parents, and not without some excitement, the girl set off for a new life, taking a job on the luxurious estate of a wealthy landowner who, impressed by her reputation as a hard worker, promised to pay twice as much. The family saw off their daughter with sincere cordiality, feeling a sense of pride and satisfaction from the new source of income, and looked forward to the future, expecting a significant improvement in their financial situation. Walking through the streets of the city, Leticia decided to keep silent about the fact that her absence after receiving her first salary would become permanent, and she would disappear forever from the life of her family in a month. Baron Jefferson's mansion was stately and imposing, impressive in its scale and architectural grandeur. The stern maid looking at the lady noticed that she did not look her 16 years, to which Woods replied that everyone in her family was short. Handing her carefully executed papers, the servant politely asked the girl to sign the necessary documents confirming her official employment. Looking at the girl threateningly, the servant began to say that if she decided to leave her job in less than 3 months, she would not receive wages, and if she fled the country, it would be impossible for her to return back. Silently, the maid admired how Leticia responded seriously and fearlessly, showing maturity and confidence in a difficult situation. Turning to Bet, another servant, she asked her to show the new girl to her chambers so that she could familiarize herself with her new surroundings and feel comfortable in the house. Bet, with a look of displeasure on her face, nudged Woods and said that she didn't have enough hands to do all the tasks, so she invited her to come along with her to help with the work. Quietly and imperceptibly, the peasant woman, barely hiding her joy, enjoyed the fact that she was accepted as a maid. As if reading her mind, another woman said that this place would accept little girls like her, even without letters of recommendation, because there weren't enough workers. Bet agreed to recognize the sincere efforts and work of the new girl if the baby was able to hold out in this place for more than 3 months, proving her perseverance and dedication to work. Between cleaning and cooking, Leticia chose the second option, dreaming of becoming an adult, saving enough money, and opening her own restaurant or cafe in the future. Handing the mop into Bet's hands, she stated that Woods would do the cleaning. To this, the girl awkwardly added that she also likes to put everything in order. Having sent the new girl to clean a particularly dirty room, the maid left her with a slight sigh, leaving her alone with a difficult task full of dust and disorder. Standing next to the tall and mature other servant, the little girl greeted her shyly, trying to look confident and not appear awkward in front of her elders. Sighing heavily, the woman introduced herself as Gully Ender, and with a note of fatigue in her voice, asked the little girl to wipe the dirty corner that had stagnated under the old furniture where dust had accumulated. Soon a conversation began between the two representatives of the fair sex, and Leticia learned that the maids' rooms were located on the 4th floor, which was useful information for her. Satisfied that the acquaintance started well, the girl realized that if she continued to try and show her best side, then there was a chance to get a job that she would really like. Under the endless clear blue sky, the imperial palace stood majestically like the embodiment of infinite beauty and power, attracting the eye with its splendor and grandeur. Standing in the corridor, Professor Gunit spoke indignantly with the heirs, who were silent like walls, not wanting to say a word in response to his remarks. The scientist could not believe that such a fool would be the emperor of their country, and was shocked that fate had placed such a high and responsible position on the shoulders of this man. Frustrated, waving his hand, the man said that if this boy becomes a ruler, then everyone risks losing their heads, since his incompetence could lead to catastrophic consequences. The professor mockingly noted that only Jorge believed that the boy was not a complete fool, and in fact everyone around him saw him only as a homely fool. Frustrated, the man clenched his fists, looking with disappointment at the bookworm who had never held a sword in his hands and clearly did not understand what real struggle and responsibility meant. The emperor's father was a very intelligent and wise gentleman who ruled the country with outstanding insight and determination, ensuring stability and prosperity. But for unknown reasons, the resources of the empire were depleted, and the little prince was sent to live on an estate outside the city. There he began to hide from prying eyes, leading a solitary life in secret from everyone. Having grown up under the care of mercenaries rather than nannies, the prince, when he met Georges, did not utter a word, remaining silent as if he did not know how to conduct a conversation with another person. When the boy said the word tree, the man who came to take the gentleman to the palace did not understand anything, and was puzzled, not understanding what this could mean in the context of their meeting. Upon returning to the empire's castle, George began questioning the servants about why they remained silent about the prince's speech problems. He was persistent and demanded an explanation, trying to find out why this information was hidden from him. After introducing the commander, the senior official replied that the report to the emperor had stated that the commander had completed all tasks and therefore the prince's speech problems had been overlooked or considered minor. Clutching his head, Jorge realized that he could not change anything and that his efforts to correct the situation would not lead to the desired result, leaving him in deep despair. While apologizing to his master for his poor choice of professor, the commander was interrupted by the prince, who mentioned the name of a girl from his past, thereby diverting attention from the conversation and creating an unexpected turn in the discussion. The boy firmly pronounced the name Leticia, repeating it again and confirming that this particular name belonged to the girl he met in the forest. Meanwhile, Woods, having completed her cleaning, was taken by surprise when she received an unexpected visit interrupting her work and causing an unexpected jolt to the quiet activity. Bet, putting her hand on the new girl's shoulder, said with a smile that she could finally start working in the kitchen, which made the girl very happy. Gully, who is responsible for the cleanliness of the estate, also congratulated the little girl on her promotion, smiling warmly and expressing joy at her new assignment. During all this time, Leticia made many friends among the maids, winning their trust and affection thanks to her friendliness and sincere interest in life. Rushing towards her new job, the girl was determined and optimistic. She understood that this was an important opportunity for her to demonstrate her skills. It took a while, but Jorge finally remembered the red-haired child he met in the forest. This meeting resurfaced in his memory. The man made the assumption that the emperor would like to meet with an old acquaintance, and having received approval, decided that he would find that lady no matter the cost. The head cook, a woman named Ruth, leaned her large figure over Woods, looking at her in surprise and noting how thin the girl was in comparison. Not trusting that this frail girl could cope with the work in the kitchen, the cook ordered another assistant to bring food left over from the previous lunch to make the task a little easier. Eating a fragrant and delicious pie, Leticia hoped that she would not be sent back to cleaning and that her efforts in the kitchen would be adequately appreciated so that she could remain in her new position and continue to develop in this role. Having tasted only a small piece of baked goods, the maiden beamed with happiness and expressed her gratitude to the cook for the amazing taste and skill that made this moment truly unforgettable. With a smile, Ruth asked who else would work with Woods if she didn't eat well, emphasizing the importance of good nutrition for productivity. Satisfied, Leticia promised herself that in this life she would definitely learn to cook in order to realize her culinary potential and delight others with delicious dishes. A village in the mountains lived a calm and measured life until suddenly a loud cry was heard about a knight who broke the silence and attracted the attention of all its inhabitants. Wood's family, in complete confusion and despair, turned to a man asking for help in finding their daughter, who had recently disappeared, leaving them in anxious anticipation and deep sadness. George asked whether the girl could leave the house of her own free will and received a categorical denial in response, which only increased his anxiety and doubts. Scratching the back of his head thoughtfully, the knight tried to clarify the situation, clarifying that in this case, neither kidnapping nor murder had taken place in order to dispel all possible fears. Sobbing, the mother said that her daughter was sure to return home for the weekend a week ago, but now she was informed that her daughter had boarded a carriage heading to Tatum. The man listened carefully to the story, noting that Tatum was the closest city to this village. The parents, despite all their efforts, were unable to find their daughter. After checking his age, the knight also learned that Woods was only 14 years old. She was a young lady too young to work as a maid. The knight remembered that in the past, there were cases when the poor sold their relatives to the rich for money, but in this case, as he knew, ladies often ran away from their first salary, unable to withstand the difficult working conditions. Realizing that there was no longer any point in talking to these hypocrites and that their words would not lead to real results, Jorge turned away and believing that it would be better to leave, headed away. For the first time, the young master openly expressed his desires and expectations, and the knight, realizing the importance of this moment, knew that he could not let him down. A whole month had passed, and now the baron's estate was illuminated only by the dim, flickering light of night lanterns, which gave it a gloomy and mysterious look. Having finished washing the dishes, Leticia sat down at the table to eat. She was sad and depressed because she was not given the opportunity to work with a knife or dough in the kitchen, which was her real dream. Smiling, watching the baby's appetite, Ruth asked why she was so eager to work in the kitchen, because for her it was not just a job but also a real passion. Woods admitted that she wanted to learn how to cook because it was a true desire that the Virgin sought to realize with full dedication. After this, the maid added that she did not mind washing the dishes, since she had the opportunity to eat the food prepared by the cook, and thereby enjoy the results of her labor. This brought a smile to the older woman's face. The cook decided that from tomorrow she would begin teaching Leticia culinary skills and teach her how to peel potatoes in order to help the girl realize her aspiration. These words made a deep impression on Woods, and she was sincerely glad to receive this opportunity. Promising to try her best, the little girl was determined to learn and improve in cooking. Wandering from side to side around the room, the aristocrat was in complete bewilderment, not understanding why such an important and outstanding person wanted to visit his house. It was Baron Jefferson who sought to ensure that the maids worked more diligently and efficiently, hoping for their complete devotion and maximum efficiency in performing their duties. The man's wife confirmed her husband's words, saying that it was time to teach the foolish miners a lesson they would surely not forget, and to show them what true hard work and responsibility meant. Sitting down on the sofa, the nobleman noted with regret that among the servants there was not a single truly reliable person. He instructed his wife to organize and carefully supervise the upcoming meeting. After the death of his brother, the man was able to assume the title of Baron, and this meeting provided him with an excellent opportunity to begin receiving invitations to palace balls and social events. Sitting at the dining table and enjoying her meal, Ruth was suddenly interrupted when she suddenly heard someone quietly but persistently calling her from behind, which attracted the woman's attention. The one who disturbed her calm turned out to be a boy, who with a serious look announced that the lady had ordered the festive table to be prepared for dinner, which required immediate action. The dishes loudly broke when the name of Horge, the emperor's servant, was spoken, thereby causing a wave of shock and surprise among those present. In the novel, this man faithfully served the ruthless tyrant. His loyalty was undeniable, despite the cruelty and despotism of his master. During the struggle for the throne, the imperial spouses died, and as a result, the throne was taken by Crown Prince Michael Sonnet de Brant, a royal relative and an orphan who finds himself at the center of complex political intrigue. George was the only one who remained loyal to the prince to the end, and in turn the prince became attached to his faithful friend, valuing devotion and loyalty more than anything else. Soon after Michael's accession to the throne, his mind began to fail, and he began to execute his subjects. However, George, a loyal advisor, convinced the prince to replace the execution with imprisonment, softening the policy and maintaining order in the empire. However, 50 years after the start of his reign, the man was killed, and no one was able to stop the ruthless tyrant who continued to spread fear and horror. Soon after his death, the ruler himself died. Sighing heavily, Leticia was surprised to learn that her old friend Michael's name was the same as the emperor's, adding another unexpected and disturbing detail to this complex situation. Jorge himself resolutely headed towards the baron's house, trying to find the one his master wanted to see, despite all the difficulties and obstacles along the way. When the man got out of the carriage, he was immediately greeted by the servants, who escorted him into the owner's house with due respect and professionalism, thereby providing a warm and attentive welcome. Thinking thoughtfully, Jorge looked for a way to sneak the lady into the palace without attracting too much attention, and planned how the baron could help in this matter by providing a safe and secretive route. As an exchange, you can offer established connections in secular society, which will simplify the appointment of Woods as a maid in the palace, if the Baron introduces her as his niece. The man was confident that he could fulfill the prince's wishes, and Leticia was not just a beautiful toy for the ruler. Its significance was far from superficial. There was real chaos in the kitchen. Everyone was bustling around and preparing for the upcoming reception, trying to cope with multiple tasks and prepare everything for the important event. It was Woods's first time peeling potatoes in the kitchen as a cook, and despite her limited experience, she tried to do the best job possible. There was a loud cry, and Ruth, concerned, immediately asked what had happened, eager to find out the cause of the alarm and ensure peace in the kitchen. One of the maids pointed out missing silverware, which required an immediate investigation. An adult housekeeper stood with her assistants near an empty cupboard, realizing that without silverware, she would not be able to serve food for important guests, and this created a serious problem for the upcoming reception. Without hesitation, Ruth ordered Emily to immediately report the incident to the mistress so that the mistress would be aware of the problem and could take the necessary measures. The cook explained that if Madame is not informed about the incident now, she will not only punish all the maids in the future, but will also require them to go naked and go in search of silverware, which will be a real disaster. Immediately realizing the seriousness of the situation, Emily hastened to convey all the details of the incident to the hostess so that she could respond promptly. Surprisingly, the servants were not particularly tense or agitated, since they knew that from time to time the mistress arranged for things to go missing in order to keep them on their toes and maintain discipline. Another cook said that during the training of new servants, something always went missing, and the mistress knew very well who was guilty of this petty theft. The maid, upset and puzzled, could not understand why the mistress resorted to such methods, creating unnecessary difficulties and tension among the houseworkers. This caused laughter among the cooks who, knowing the customs of the Baron's house by heart, could not help but smile, remembering how similar tricks had previously been used to identify unscrupulous servants. When suddenly the Baron's wife entered the kitchen, asking the head cook about the missing cutlery, which caused anxiety and tension among the entire kitchen staff. The jaded aristocrat said thoughtfully that the criminal should be found as soon as possible in order to avoid further complications and maintain calm. Jorge's presence made it difficult to find the thief, but when he left, the situation could only get worse and the search would become even more difficult. Ruth offered not only to apologize to Mr. Knight for the awkwardness, but also to carefully search all possible secluded corners and hidden places where the missing dishes could be hidden in order to eliminate the misunderstanding. Remembering the events described in the novel, Leticia could not understand how they could so easily ask for something from such a noble guest without taking into account the high status and possible consequences of such an appeal. Looking mockingly at the gray mouse, the lady of the house said that the criminal was still among them, adding that her suspicions about the presence of thieves in the house were confirmed. Brushing strands of hair from her face, the noble lady stated that Ruth had no education and therefore could not fully understand the complexity and significance of what was happening. Taking control of the situation, the head cook called the attention of all the workers, bringing them back to reality and reminding them to focus on cooking. Leticia returned to peeling potatoes, realizing that her head was buzzing with tension and complex thoughts, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to concentrate on this seemingly simple task. At that moment, the door opened with a loud creak, and the butler entered the room, who sternly and persistently ordered Woods to follow him, leaving no room for objection. Grabbing the servant's hand, the man did not listen to excuses. He knew that if the servant tried to explain what was happening in front of everyone, the situation would only get worse. Confused, the girl stared at the houseworker, not understanding what was happening and why the situation was unfolding this way. Modestly, but with a hint of excitement, the girl entered the luxurious room where the owner of the house was already waiting for her, surrounded by elegant furnishings and attention. Falling to her knees, Woods began to make excuses, stating that she had not touched the dishes and had spent the entire time in the kitchen doing work thus hoping to prove her innocence. But then the lady was interrupted by the voice of the gentleman who called her here for another reason, making her realize that excuses might be inappropriate. Instead, the aristocrat revealed a precious brooch, a gift from an old friend which was found in Wood's bed, causing shock and confusion among those present. Leticia looked at the decoration with fear, afraid of losing it. In a desperate attempt to save it, she hid it under her pillow, which unfortunately turned out to be a mistake. Kneeling in front of the owner, the maid heatedly justified herself, claiming that she had not stolen anything, and asked for forgiveness, hoping for mercy. The man could not calm down, and insistently demanded an explanation of how such a simpleton like her got the precious jewelry, believing that such a thing was impossible without secret machinations. However, he was ready to believe the lady if the maid told the truth about how and where she got the jewelry and provided a convincing explanation. The girl decided to openly admit that in the past she had helped a respected person, and as a token of gratitude, he gave a gift. Leticia knew nothing about the origin of the brooch, and now she had to present a convincing explanation to the Baron in order to justify her position and calm suspicions. Suddenly, the conversation between the nobleman and the servants was interrupted by a loud crash that came from the next room, attracting the attention of everyone present and disturbing the current tense atmosphere. The maids entered the room demanding that Leticia return to her work, immediately interrupting the conversation and adding even more excitement. Bette stated that she was ready to vouch for the baby, assuring that she did not steal the dishes and completely trusted the lady's honesty, which added confidence to the situation and changed her development. Ruth added that she personally saw the new girl enter the room last night and insisted that if Woods had exhibited any strange behavior, everyone would have noticed immediately, which confirmed the absence of theft. The irritated Baron said with obvious irritation that the workers should immediately go to their places and stop interfering with his current affairs. However, the maids remained where they were, declaring that they would only leave the premises together with their colleague, demonstrating unity and support despite the master's insistent instructions. Ruth emphatically added that the kitchen was short-staffed, and she urgently needed help, emphasizing that her co-workers' support was critical to successfully completing all necessary tasks. This caused anger on the part of the aristocrat, but the servants were in no hurry to calm down, confident in their rightness and continuing to insist on their position. Growling angrily, the nobleman exclaimed, "Did they all really think that the man made such a scandal just for the sake of ordinary silver, showing his indignation and dissatisfaction with the situation?" At this moment, the Baron was unexpectedly interrupted by Georges, who decisively intervened in the situation to restore order and direct the conversation in a constructive direction, trying to calm the heated aristocrat. At that moment, the man jumped up from his seat in fear of the wrath of the Emperor's closest associate, realizing that any further mistakes could lead to even more serious consequences. Scoffing, Jorge noticed that they had something to talk about with the Baron and added that it would be better to get rid of strangers in order to discuss everything without unnecessary ears and interference. With her hand on her colleague's shoulder, Ruth urged her on, reminding her that they had a lot of work ahead of them and they needed to hurry up to cope with all the tasks on time. The cook, laughing, noted that this was not the first time that someone had been framed in connection with missing things. She added that such incidents had happened before, and in this house such situations had become almost commonplace. Affectionately, the cook admitted that Leticia was necessary for them during work and was a valuable member of the team, emphasizing her importance and role in the successful completion of all tasks. Smiling, Woods agreed to do her best to help the team and complete the assigned tasks in the best possible way, demonstrating readiness and dedication. The knight and the Baron discussed the interrogation of the maid sitting in a dark room. Moreover, in theory, George should have been with the wife of the master of the house at this time, fulfilling his accompanying duties. The man explained that he heard screams and came to find out what was going on, showing his concern and desire to understand the situation in order to understand the reasons for what was happening. The aristocrat was angry with his maids because due to their failures, he lost the opportunity to join high society, which caused him deep disappointment and anger. The discovery of the imperial brooch immediately seemed unusual and strange, causing bewilderment and many questions about its origin and meaning among everyone present. While drinking a cup of tea, the Baron realized that the knight's arrival was probably connected with this decoration, which suggested a deeper connection between the events and the upcoming consequences. Coldly and decisively, George declared that he had uncovered the noble's lies and demanded an explanation, leaving no room for doubt in his determination to find out the truth. Deciding to confess, the man placed on the table the gift he had found, which was the subject of discussion. Thus he decided to show that his intentions were honest. The surprised knight asked where the nobleman found this jewel, receiving the answer that it belonged to a maid who could hardly have stolen it. Shrugging, the noble asked what exactly George wanted from him as an ordinary baron, emphasizing that he expected a clearer explanation of his demands and goals. And so during the tea party, an important deal was concluded, which became a significant event that changed current circumstances. Helping the workers around the house, Leticia could not get rid of thoughts about what would now become of the precious jewelry that the master had taken. When suddenly the butler unexpectedly entered and, interrupting her thoughts, called Woods, saying that Sir George required her immediate presence. Ruth tried to protect her charge, but the butler, only obeying the master's orders, calmly insisted that Woods immediately follow him. Having gathered her courage, the girl realized that there was no point in wasting time on doubts and decided that the time had come to go to Jorge and find out what he wanted from her. Lightly knocking on the door, Leticia, with a timid voice, asked permission to enter the chambers of the aristocrats, feeling more and more excited about the upcoming meeting. Inside the room, at a sophisticated table, the nobles sat down having a leisurely conversation, enjoying aromatic tea and clearly discussing something important, immersed in their thoughts and conversation. With a smile transforming his previous stern expression, the Baron politely invited the maid to come inside, demonstrating with his gesture that she could join them. Woods continued to insist that she did not commit the theft and that she had nothing to do with the disappearance, trying to convince everyone of her innocence. The man interrupted the conversation, claiming that the servant was his relative, whom he completely trusted, and that any accusations against her were completely unfounded. The nobleman began to say that Woods's mother was his distant sister, emphasizing that their family ties over the years had provided him with special trust in the girl. Extending his hand towards the knight, the man announced that his niece would now go to work in the palace of the Empire, emphasizing the importance of this change and confidence in her future assignment. Leticia, gripped by horror and fear for her life, was deeply shocked by the prospect of being in the palace, which caused her great anxiety. Gently placing his hands on the maid's shoulders, the Baron asked to call him uncle, trying to create a warmer and more trusting atmosphere between them. Now the girl had to work as a servant in the palace, where the most complex intrigues flared up and where life could be in danger due to the intricacies of court politics. Leticia was ready to beg her master on her knees not to send her along with the knight, realizing that this could mean finding herself in a dangerous and unenviable position. While there was a fierce argument between them, George calmly drank tea without changing his facial expression, and a light smile invariably remained on his lips. With tears in her eyes, Leticia begged the owner to allow her to stay on the estate, arguing that the lady's presence would only bring harm and worsen the Baron's reputation. The man hastened to reassure the girl, assuring the servant that his wife was closely monitoring her condition, and that Woods was fully ready to go to the Emperor's palace, where important events awaited them. After this, he added that other employees of the house also expressed their trust and respect to her, which emphasized the importance of the maiden and helped create an atmosphere of mutual understanding and support. Trembling with fear, Leticia tried to convince her imaginary uncle to stay in the estate, but all attempts were in vain and everything was useless since his determination was unshakable. Leaning towards the maid's ear, Madame sternly ordered her to stand up and not be stubborn, emphasizing that she herself did not like this whole performance, but the situation required an immediate solution, and any resistance was unacceptable. Obediently bowing her head and realizing she had no other choice, Leticia accepted the praise that followed her resignation, feeling a mixture of relief and inner humility. George, getting up from his seat, invited Woods to leave immediately, explaining that all the girls' things were already packed and placed in the carriage ready for departure. Dissatisfied with the girls' slowness, the Baron hurried the maid, emphasizing that the knight was a very busy person and could not wait any longer, emphasizing the importance of making all the necessary preparations as quickly as possible. Dressed in a new dress and with suitcases in hand, Leticia followed the Emperor's faithful servant, preparing for the journey and anticipating the upcoming changes. Woods a stern look, the man ordered him not to exit the vehicle without permission, emphasizing the importance of following this rule to ensure safety and order. With a smile and hope of escape, the lady cautiously asked if she would go alone in the carriage, hoping for the possibility of privacy and freedom from persistent control. The guard instantly recognized the cunning plan, noticing that everything she was trying to hide was written on her face. Every movement and expression betrayed his true intentions, like a book whose pages were open before him. Denying all accusations, Leticia tried to clear her good name, but her efforts only irritated the man. In the end, he said that no one would pay attention to a simple maid. The girl agreed with his words, but she was lucky. The Baron recognized the lady as his niece, which opened up new opportunities and privileges for her. George, clutching his head and confused in his own lies, asked why the Emperor chose the maid. Leticia tried to grab onto these words and leave, but the knight was not going to let the lady go so easily. As a result, the man agreed with the arguments that the little girl gave. The aristocrat recognized the girl as his relative, and therefore she should have gone on the journey alone. Sitting down on a comfortable seat in her new smart clothes, Woods felt deep relief and joy that she had managed to avoid the worst consequences and troubles. George strictly ordered the lady to sit quietly until the very end of the trip and not even think about escaping, emphasizing that her behavior would be carefully monitored. The horses, feeling the rhythm of the coachman's command, quickly rushed forward, their hooves loudly knocking on the road, creating a melodic rhythm that accompanied the rapid movement of the cart. Leticia could barely keep her balance as the sudden and unpredictable movements of the vehicle threw her body from side to side. The palace would still treat her like a servant. Moreover, the bloodthirsty tyrant himself was going to become the owner of this place, which added even more tension and uncertainty to the situation. Clutching her head in complete despair, the girl thought helplessly about how she could escape from this unbearable situation. Meanwhile, time flew by, and when the carriage finally stopped, she found herself in front of the majestic and imposing entrance to the castle of the imperial family, which shone with luxury and grandeur. Pressed against the glass of the window, the girl was surprised to note how unusually quickly the trip was progressing. My gaze slid over the beautiful landscapes flashing outside the window. Jorge stood in the square, arguing heatedly with other guards about some issue. His bright emotions and loud words attracted the attention of passers-by, creating a tense atmosphere around. While the man clearly and loudly instructed his charges, the lady quietly and carefully exited the carriage, trying not to attract too much attention, and acting as carefully as possible to avoid notice. While Jorge was distracted by noise and arguments with his subordinates, she took advantage of the moment and quietly and quickly headed towards the bushes. Looking around, the little girl was surprised to realize that she found herself in a lovely garden full of various plants and flowers. There is a green oasis all around, replete with bright and fragrant plants. Sighing heavily, Leticia had difficulty coming to terms with the new reality, in which she constantly had to hide and be on guard as if the whole world was trying to catch her. Suddenly, the girl raised her head and realized that she found herself at the dead end of a labyrinth consisting of dense bushes that seemed to be locked in their green captivity. The tangled labyrinth stretching into infinity turned out to be huge and impenetrable, like an insidious green trap that could deprive a person of hope of exit. Leticia tirelessly searched for a way out of the tangled labyrinth, but all attempts were in vain. If she dared to scream, she would quickly be found and captured, which would only make her plight worse. Seeing a faint light in the distance, the little girl resolutely headed through the thickets, hoping that this would be a way out of the ongoing labyrinth. In a clearing among flowering plants stood Mikhail, surrounded by a mysterious aura, as if he were part of this magical and mysterious forest landscape. Seeing in the stranger his friend from the distant past, the boy stared at her in amazement. His face immediately turned red from the deep embarrassment and violent excitement that filled his heart. Smiling at the guy, Woods noted with a slight laugh that everything that was happening around seemed like the plot of a strange and absurd dream from which it was so difficult to awaken. Smiling, the emperor uttered an ancient word, holding a bouquet of schisandra flowers in his hand, which gave his speech a special solemnity and sophistication. Staring blankly at the plants, Leticia asked what exactly the boy meant, as her thoughts were completely absorbed in the mystery that was posed to her by what was happening. The girl laughed loudly when she realized that the guy was referring to their chance meeting. It seemed completely impossible because he was an aristocrat, and she was a simple peasant woman. But Mikhail seemed absolutely real when, smiling sweetly, the lady said that their meeting was predetermined by fate, as if the universe itself had confirmed their connection. This seemed especially sweet to Woods, and hiding his joy behind his palm, the lady could not contain her emotions, enjoying this unexpected moment of happiness. Seeing that the woman's hand was bandaged, the boy immediately became concerned about his companion's well-being, but she only brushed aside his concerns, demonstrating calmness. Leticia was immersed in deep thoughts about how the young man managed to penetrate the garden of the emperor himself. This riddle occupied all my thoughts, overshadowing other concerns. Understanding from the young man's words about the mosquito and swimming, the lady assumed that he could have entered here secretly hiding his true intentions and goals. Looking tenderly at the boy, the maiden realized with deep tenderness and sympathy how many difficult trials and sufferings the aristocrat had had to endure in life, and sincerely pitied him. After this, the boy, with tenderness in his voice, mentioned some cute chick, and then, as a sign of his sincere kindness and care, offered his interlocutor a sweet which he carefully held in his hands. Having tried the strange round fruit for the first time, the lady could not contain her delight, enjoying the incredible taste that so pleasantly surprised her. Smiling, the lady agreed with the prince's assumption that there were as many fruits in the garden as there were ants in the anthill. The woman's face lit up with satisfaction from this funny comparison. The guy calmed the lady down, assuring her not to worry, using the unusual word foam, which, although it sounded strange, was pronounced with sincere reassurance and concern. So they sat together, enjoying the bright colors, sweet aroma, and delicious treats, immersed in an atmosphere of peace and harmony. Woods had the idea in his head that this place was secretly built on the personal orders of the emperor, which gave the whole environment a special atmosphere of mystery and exclusivity. Even if the boy came from a family of wealthy aristocrats, it is unlikely that he would have been allowed to walk around the sovereign's gardens so easily, which only strengthened the impression of the unusualness and exclusivity of his presence here. Upset and full of anxiety, Leticia anxiously inquired whether it had happened that the boy had run away from home again. The woman's voice was laced with genuine excitement and concern. Mikhail paused meaningfully, thereby confirming the lady's assumption, and his silence became convincing evidence that the guesses were correct. Understandingly, Wood said that she also ran away from her former home because she was not welcome there, and she no longer had a place to return to. Wrapping her arms around her knees and with curiosity in her eyes, the little girl asked the guy how long he would have to spend here. After listening to his answer, she learned that it was not an escape at all. After this, Leticia added that she considered escape only to go forever to a place where a person would be impossible to find, emphasizing that a temporary stay had nothing to do with real escape. To the word unicorn, the girl replied that nothing impossible exists, and the maiden is a living example of this, emphasizing her belief in the feasibility of any goals. Woods did not force the boy to speak if he did not want to, since the reasons for his silence could be very different. She respected his right to privacy. Along the way, the little girl met many girls who also decided to leave their homes. Each of them chose the escape route for their own personal reasons and circumstances. Remembering her cruel and hateful family, Leticia began to tremble and cry, unable to cope with the painful memories that fell upon her. The ruler of the country watched with deep sadness and anxiety as his companion plunged into melancholy, feeling sincere concern for her emotional state and wanting to provide support at this difficult moment. As a result, the little girl told the young boy everything that had happened to her with the exception of her punishments. He listened carefully to the story, trying to console. When the girl remembered her favorite brooch, she involuntarily shuddered from the alarming realization that she had lost this priceless and so important thing for her. The boy, with sincere interest, asked the lady if she had buried her precious jewelry, to which Leticia, with regret in her voice, replied with an apology for allowing someone to take away this valuable thing. With tears in her eyes, the little girl admitted that the beautiful brooch was currently in the possession of Sir George, who unfortunately took it from the hands of the Baron. Leticia hoped with all her heart that the boy was not punished for giving the jewelry to a stranger, and that his good intentions would be appreciated despite what happened. With her head down and immersed in her thoughts, the lady was thinking about how pitiful her own situation seemed to her when she was several years older than the guy. Mikhail, showing his kindness and attention, carefully handed Woods a handkerchief so that she could use it to wipe away tears caused by sadness or emotion from her face. Leticia, having graciously accepted the handkerchief, expressed her sincere gratitude to the boy for the care and attention shown to her at this touching moment. Gently clasping the woman's hands, Mikhail warmly reminded her that in life, as in the case of a boomerang, everything comes back. Kindness, care, and sincerity always find a response. Looking at her seriously, the boy confidently outlined his plans, expressing with determination and firmness his intention to return the brooch which he considered his rightful property. For Woods to hear such words from a guy, especially considering that Mikhail expressed a desire to personally talk to Sir Jorge, which seemed completely unexpected and surprising to her. The baby urgently asked not to take such a risk, realizing all the possible consequences and dangers that could arise as a result of such a step. Mikhail firmly stated that although George might not seem as bad as a sparrow, the guy could still try to negotiate, approaching the matter like a prince, with intelligence and diplomacy. Seeing the boy's smile, the lady realized that she could not fully understand his intentions simply by asking him to remember one thing: the brooch did not have to be returned. Suddenly, an unexpected and original thought came into the girl's head. Grabbing the heir to the empire by the hands, Woods offered to become their family's maid. Reflecting on her proposal, the little girl vividly imagined how Leticia could work in the prince's house, and noted that proof of her serious intentions would be a brooch symbolizing commitment. At sunset, the lady suggested that the situation be presented in such a way that it would seem that the boy had lost the jewelry, and she herself had been waiting all this time to return the jewelry to him. A vivid image appeared in her head. Woods was praying, and Mikhail, like an angel, gave her his blessing and help, surrounding her with light and kindness. The prince froze from the enchanting radiance and tremulous requests emanating from the maiden. Her bright, sincere expression touched him to the core, awakening feelings in him that he could not ignore. Unable to refuse his companion, the boy, with a gentle look and a sigh, uttered the word grapes, which meant his consent and readiness to fulfill the lady's request. Immediately, the ruler was hugged tightly by a girl full of gratitude, and these hugs were so sincere and warm that he felt the depth of her gratitude. The couple was unexpectedly stopped by the sufferer, who seriously and persistently asked the maiden what she was doing in company with the emperor. Such a direct question filled the atmosphere with tension and expectation of explanation. This man turned out to be Horsch, who rudely and decisively stated that the lady had no right to touch the ruler, expressing in his words complete condemnation and strict unacceptability of such behavior. The baby shuddered in fear. Her fragile body suddenly shrank with fear, and an expression of anxiety flashed in her eyes. The book stated that the knight remained loyal only to those who wore the crown, especially the imperial family, becoming a symbol of devotion and nobility in their service. Sitting down next to his master, Jorge extended his hand in a friendly manner and told him that he should have warned him before going anywhere, emphasizing the importance of mutual respect and communication. Waving his hand away from the guard, Mikael thoughtfully uttered a phrase about how difficult it is to move on thin ice, metaphorically hinting at a difficult situation. The man, relying on his own strength, silently stared at the emperor, unable to understand the depth and essence of his words, trying to figure out what exactly his eminent interlocutor meant. Jorge turned to Woods in surprise as she translated the overlord's words, which sounded like an admission that all their efforts had been futile. The lady felt deep embarrassment and awkwardness under the knight's gaze and stern gaze, which made her quickly withdraw and move away, trying to hide her excitement. The girl, trembling with fear, began to try to understand the meaning of the words, saying that when Mikael told where he wanted to go, he was always directed to strange places, since no one understood what the prince meant. As proof that the little girl was telling the truth, the boy pointed his finger at his companion and called her name, confirming his words. The knight could not believe what was happening, while Leticia added that the emperor asked George to be careful to avoid further complications. The sword, its shine dimmed by the weight, fell to the ground and pierced softly into the thick grass, leaving a small dent in the green surface. Gently grabbing the lady's hands, the knight sincerely thanked Woods, expressing deep gratitude for her help and support in a difficult situation. Moreover, the man urgently asked the lady not to leave the prince and remain close to him, emphasizing the importance of presence and support. Gloomily listening to requests to become a translator for the ruler whose only task was to explain the words of the prince, Leticia felt the weight of responsibility and the difficulty of the work ahead, realizing the complexity of her new role. George could not force Woods to stay by the boy's side, but she was the only person who understood the aristocrat and therefore was extremely necessary to him. The girl understood everything but the image of a bloodthirsty tyrant into whom the guy could grow up did not give any peace, and this gloomy image did not let go of her thoughts. Mikael suddenly intervened in the conversation, decisively interrupting the conversation, when he, addressing his companion by name, urgently attracted attention and introduced his accent into the current discussion. Addressing Woods affectionately, the prince gently began the conversation about the hairpin, emphasizing its deep meaning and special value, as well as emphasizing his personal attention to the smallest details. Surprised, Leticia imagined the moment when she opened the door carefully, holding the door handle and carefully controlling her every movement, as if it were an important and delicate art. With loose hair flowing over her shoulders and a white dress that barely touched the floor, she stood motionless, looking straight ahead, completely immersed in her thoughts and reflections. Opening the same white doors in front of her, the lady saw a guy standing on the green grass. His figure stood out clearly against the backdrop of the picturesque landscape, creating a contrast with the surrounding landscape and attracting attention. Turning to the lady, Mikael smiled affectionately, and with sincere warmth, his facial expression radiated goodwill and attention, which gave the whole scene a special atmosphere of comfort and cordiality. At that moment, a deep realization occurred, and the hands of two people who previously seemed separate and distant tenderly joined in an embrace, symbolizing their new deep connection and mutual understanding as a symbol of unity. Leticia clearly realized that all this time she had been deeply connected with the prince, and this connection turned out to be much stronger and more meaningful than she could have imagined. A new day had come, and the palace of the empire, immersed in the first rays of the morning sun, came to life, filled with life and bustle, as if foreshadowing new events and twists of fate. Leticia slept sweetly, basking in the warm embrace of a soft bed, enjoying the peace and comfort that this morning hour gave her, when the whole world seemed to freeze around her. A picture of people kissing appeared before her eyes, and this scene was completely unfamiliar to the girl, causing curiosity and embarrassment. Having woken up, the lady could not immediately understand where she was. His gaze wandered around the room, trying to catch at least some familiar features, but everything around seemed alien and unfamiliar. Suddenly, Woods remembered yesterday's events and how she agreed to cooperate with the young aristocrat. My mind filled with thoughts of how unusual this day had been. Pressing the pillow to her head, the lady suddenly screamed, realizing that her old fears and anxieties had once again found their way into consciousness. A soft voice was heard nearby, and while the lady, immersed in the darkness of her thoughts, lay sadly on the bed, the girl was carefully asked if everything was all right with her. In the room was a beautiful woman whose hair was neatly pulled back. She was dressed in a strict uniform, emphasizing elegance and authority. Carefully placing her hand on her ward, the maid asked about her well-being and temperature, showing sincere concern and attentiveness. Leticia answered the question about tomorrow's breakfast with a smile, expressing a desire to enjoy the delicious and varied treats that were to be tried. Sighing heavily and feeling the weight of disappointment fall on the woman's shoulders, Woods realized that Sir George was not going to perceive her as a simple servant. Mikhail was a relative of the emperor, raised as a puppet. His parents passed away long ago, and the ruler never showed interest in the boy's life, leaving him completely alone and in oblivion. Every day the tyrant sank deeper into madness, and when Jorge, the only person he could trust, died, the prince completely lost his mind, plunging into madness and despair. The novel mentioned that after the coronation, the boy began to speak better, which meant that Woods should have just been patient for a few years. Mikhail will not spend his entire life using just one word. Thus the girl decided that she would save her salary, and as soon as she left here, she would immediately open her own restaurant, making her long-time dream come true. The maids, with care and respect, brought the exquisitely decorated dish to the lady's room, asking whether she would prefer to enjoy her meal at an elegant table or comfortably in bed. Smiling sweetly, the maid suggested that a meal in a cozy bed would be much more pleasant and comfortable than at an ordinary table, adding a touch of homeliness at this moment. The food that was brought was obviously of superior quality compared to what is usually served to ordinary workers. The food was varied and delicious, indicating careful preparation and care. Leticia, thinking that the meal would be incomplete without this addition, politely asked the servants to also bring some fresh milk. Noticing that the lady had still not gone down to the chambers, Horsch entered the room, deciding to personally find out what was the matter and check if everything was okay with the guest. The girl answered boringly that if she tried to escape, the knight could easily catch her, to which the man expressed satisfaction, appreciating the lady's understanding of the situation and wisdom. Reaching out his hand, Jorge handed the lady a folder with documents neatly folded into a delicate leather file, thus demonstrating his attentiveness. Taking the documents in her hands, the girl was surprised. It turned out to be not a contract as she expected, but a paper in which responsibilities were spelled out, and the salary was 10 times more than what Leticia received from the Baron. The baby froze motionless, carefully holding the pen in her hand, as with a concentrated expression on her face, the noblewoman began to sign an important contract, carefully delving into every word. Woods pressed Jorge to provide a clear and detailed explanation of exactly what role she was required to perform, and if not service-related, who exactly she was required to represent. The knight praised the new girl, noting that the girl was not as stupid as it might seem at first glance, and demonstrated much more skill and intelligence. Staring blankly at the man, Leticia waited for an explanation when she stated that the lady was no one according to her documents. Woods was genuinely outraged by the situation where, despite her status in society being what could be called a nobody, she still had to carry out many obligations and tasks in the palace which seemed extremely unfair. The man was deeply amazed when he learned that the little girl was fully aware of the Baron's complex machinations and the carefully planned performance that they organized together. Leticia herself could not understand the reasons why she was not appointed as the prince's servant, since she was not given any explanation or reason for such a refusal. George began to explain that the tasks assigned to Woods were much more complex and extensive than those of an ordinary maid. He added that since everyone thought the manager was an idiot, her duties were even more difficult. Leticia screamed indignantly after learning the bitter truth that the guy was not as stupid as it seemed at first glance, but simply had problems with speech, which misled everyone. Sitting in bed, the lady called Jorge a terrible man whom many feared. The little girl did not understand why others could consider the prince a fool and not be afraid of the knight who inspired fear with his presence. The man smiling called the Baron a hillbilly who did not understand anything about the current situation. At the same time, they tried not to talk openly about the heir's health problems so as not to create unnecessary concern. Ultimately, the palace official added that it was all about the reputation of the royal family, and any leaks or negative mentions could seriously affect the image and credibility. The puzzle began to come together. The emperor carefully controlled rumors about the prince's health. Therefore, when the boy ascends the throne, there will be no problems with the fact that he had speech difficulties as a child. Leticia realized that the main task of her stay in the imperial castle was to convince everyone that the prince was a fairly smart person, despite all the preconceived opinions and rumors. Jorge confirmed that having arrived at the castle, the girl had to remain just a nobody, a worker from the Baron's house, in order to be able to become the prince's translator. This position allowed her to maintain a modest status. With one decisive swipe, the papers were thrown to the floor, scattered around in disarray like random pieces of information that no longer mattered. Leaning towards Woods with a serious look, the knight gave her the order to sign all the necessary documents, since she had finally fully realized and understood the essence of what was happening, and now it was important to complete the formalities as soon as possible. The girl said that in the palace there were not only maids, but also ladies-in-waiting and various workers who could easily replace her in this position if necessary. The man categorically objected that this had not been taken into account enough, and emphasized that such important details should not have been left without due attention and elaboration. Moreover, George began to think about making the girl the prince's bride, which in turn caused her deep indignation and violent discontent. However, there was one important condition. The ruler could not marry before officially taking office, since previous brides often left this world for a variety of reasons. Leticia was deeply upset to learn that she could be put in such a dangerous role, since she was perceived as a poor girl from a poor family. The man realized that immediately after her true abilities became known, a female candidacy would be rejected, since everyone would know that she could make an intelligent and worthy person out of a ruler. Woods nodded understandingly and said the word unicorn, which seemed out of place but apparently had a special meaning in this situation. When the knight asked about the meaning of this word, the lady explained that unicorn belonged to the prince, who often used this word when talking about things that seemed impossible. The man was extremely indignant and immersed in dark thoughts, since he could not understand such an obvious and simple thing for such a long time. Leaning towards the lady, Jorge began to assure her that he was ready to give his life for her if only she would continue to remain close to the ruler. These words put the little girl in an awkward position, making her feel embarrassed. Leticia walked forward in her new clothes. A carmine-colored dress decorated with exquisite ruffles shimmered in the light and emphasized grace and sophistication. Having tripped over the hem of her outfit, Leticia fell to the floor, which caused a terrible fright in one of the maids, who froze in a panic, not knowing how to help. She should have called a servant to help carry the hem of the dress, but the girl decided to cope with the difficulties on her own, trying to show her independence and confidence. In an attempt to gain pity for herself, Woods sought to return to her usual clothes, covering her face with a scarf to hide her emotions and show her embarrassment and uncertainty. The maid categorically refused, emphasizing that George had given strict orders for the lady to get used to her new status and surroundings. The little girl felt awkward from such close attention because she considered the position of a translator to be ordinary and not worthy of such excessive attention. Thus, the girl fulfilled her duties by assisting the aristocrats in understanding the words spoken by the prince so that everyone could understand the essence of his statements. Noticing the strange behavior of the lady, the servant offered to bring a cup of tea for Woods, and she, to her surprise, gratefully agreed. Exquisite sweets were served with tea, including delicate cakes, fragrant cookies, and juicy fresh strawberries, which made the tea party especially refined and enjoyable. Georges entered the room dressed in a magnificent uniform that shone brightly and attracted everyone's attention with its impeccable appearance. The lady needed to interrupt her meal and follow the knight along the corridors of the palace to discuss an important matter. During their walk through the palace, Leticia inquired how the knight could afford to spend time with her when the prince was alone and in danger. The man shrugged this off with an invisible smile, explaining that Mikhail was so inaccessible and protected that no one would dare even try to harm him. The point was that if the prince was killed not by order of the ruler, then the person who would take his position as heir would immediately become a target for elimination. In the eyes of those around him, the boy seemed only a simple doll and a fool who would never have a chance to become an emperor. However, for others it was beneficial to leave the boy alone. Leticia suggested translating the ruler's words exclusively for the knight, so as not to attract unnecessary attention and not disturb the calm of the situation. George stopped and said that he recognized the fact that Woods's presence in the castle was associated with some danger, but he simply could not leave the heir alone. It was a pity that the boy was treated like a fool, not realizing that he would become a powerful emperor in the future. But it was better to avoid the threat of death until the prince was ready for such trials. Making sure that there was no one around and nothing could violate their privacy, the knight carefully placed a finger to his lips and then motioned for the lady to follow him, observing complete silence and caution. Instead of following the usual routes, they entered a dark room. The girl asked the knight what lessons the prince took. The man did not realize the importance of classes, which caused indignation among the lady who believed that she herself should also prepare for lessons and important events. Shrugging, the knight added that there was no need to worry, since he had no right to inform the boy about the boy's schedule every day. Surprised, the girl realized that she would not only have to accompany the prince during his meetings with other people, but also be present in all the boy's daily affairs. Left alone between the shelves of books, Jorge, with a serious expression on his face, asked the lady whether she thought that time could be divided into talking and silence. Pressing his hand to his chin, the castle worker thoughtfully remarked that if you think about it, this is reminiscent of being awake and sleeping. The translator must adapt to the prince's daily routine in order to be ready to provide assistance at any time. The sad lady realized that she had to be with the prince 24 hours a day, and this discovery made her reconsider her perception of a high salary, which previously seemed overly generous. Afterwards, the man remembered how the lady had previously asked him why the guard couldn't just leave the heir alone. The question now seemed especially relevant given the new circumstances. Frustrated, Georges revealed the sad truth that Mikhail was deeply depressed due to the fact that no one in the whole world could truly understand his inner world and feelings. It turned out that the future formidable tyrant who would execute many people cried into his pillow every night as a child, experiencing his fears and loneliness. Indeed, despite his outward severity and loneliness, the ruler had a kind and caring heart full of compassion and a sincere desire to care for others. Pressing her hand to her chest, the girl confidently declared that she would try her best, and this brought a warm smile and expression of sincere approval from the knight, filling the atmosphere with an atmosphere of support and inspiration. Leticia realized that she alone could become the voice that would represent the interests of the heir and protect his interests, embodying all the necessary responsibility and devotion. A stern-looking middle-aged woman with a commanding expression on her face told Woods to come closer to her, demonstrating that her words were to be taken seriously. This madam's name was Tessa Schuber, and she was a professor at the academy. She expressed dissatisfaction with the delay of the girl who was expected at class, demonstrating her irritation and anxiety. Leticia explained that this was a misunderstanding since she only knew how to read, which made the woman very happy. Tessa thought that the peasant woman would have to learn the alphabet from the very beginning. The professor added with a note of determination that if the lady did not wish to continue attending classes, she had every right to leave, since no one here would persistently hold her against her wishes. Frustrated, Woods realized that he had no choice but to attend class to meet his teacher's expectations and demands. The lady awkwardly turned to the heir to the throne, who with a soft and friendly smile called the girl by name, thereby adding an even greater feeling of awkwardness and clumsiness to the situation. Mikhail said the word slippers, which caused surprise among those around him since it was an unexpected and slightly strange remark in the current situation. Wood's eyes sparkled with overwhelming happiness, and the boy's words spoken with deep warmth and sincerity touched the lady to the depths of her soul, leaving her in a trembling state of delight and tenderness. Strict Tessa said that the children will have textbooks on the table, that they will have to compose themselves, emphasizing the importance of their independent work and responsibility. Having opened the book, the girl stared with genuine surprise at the empty pages, not expecting to find such an unexpected emptiness, which seemed full of mysteries and misunderstandings. The teacher added that students would independently record the material they were going to learn, thereby emphasizing the importance of their active participation in the educational process. Raising her hand, Leticia asked if they would study only history, or if other subjects would be included in the program, which would allow them to better understand the entire curriculum. The woman began to explain that in addition to history, she would also teach them politics and mathematics to provide a broader understanding of various disciplines. While spending time with the prince in class, Woods realized that the content was simply terrible, as the girl could not understand a single sentence and was completely lost in the material. Tessa had the students write down everything they remembered in a notebook to reinforce what they had learned and make sure they were learning the material properly. The girl apologized for forgetting the details of the story, to which the professor turned to the heir's notes to refresh her memory and clarify the necessary information. Noticing that both students were having trouble with their notes, Tessa decided to conduct an oral discussion to clarify any confusion and help them better understand the material. Leticia quickly translated the words of the boy, who was fascinated by his teacher's idea of discussing the topic, orally emphasizing the importance of personal communication and interaction. Pointing to the map, the woman said that before the advent of the empire, the continent was repeatedly divided into many small states and regions, each with its own unique history and culture. The territories of those countries were so small that even small settlements that were located in a relatively small area could declare themselves separate states striving for autonomy and independence. While the girl was bored, Mikhail listened carefully to the teacher, deeply delving into her every word and trying to understand all the nuances of the material presented. Closing her eyes, Tessa asked why in those days the continent was divided into such small states, trying to understand the reasons that led to such fragmentation. With her head in her hands, the girl was considering a possible answer when the boy suddenly said the word ankylos, which caught her attention and raised even more questions. The woman turned her gaze to the translator, demanding an explanation from her about what exactly the prince meant when he said the word ankylos. Awkwardly looking down, Leticia said that she herself did not know what exactly the prince meant, since this was the first time she had heard this word and could not decipher it. The teacher noticed that the girl had been chosen to be the prince's assistant, but unfortunately she could not translate the word that caused the difficulty. Leticia experienced deep despair and bewilderment, since for the first time in her practice, she could not correctly translate the words of the ruler, which greatly upset her and made her doubt her skills. Since the girl was unable to fulfill her promises, the professor announced that she would no longer teach her, emphasizing the importance of responsibility and reliability in teaching. The worried boy, noticing how upset his friend was, gently called her by name and tried to cheer her up in every possible way, hoping to alleviate the unpleasant condition and restore confidence. Before leaving, the woman expressed her hope that with the next teacher, the girl would not miss her chance and would be able to show all her abilities and knowledge, correcting previous mistakes. After the professor left, Leticia turned to the boy with a request to explain the meaning of the unknown word in order to understand its meaning and understand how to use it correctly in the future. The guy could not explain the meaning of the word and fell into despondency, which aggravated his condition, while the lady, noticing her mistake, tried to reassure the future emperor. Breathing heavily, the guys were distracted by Jorge, who hurried to come to them after the professor's words to discuss the issues that had arisen and try to find a solution to the problem. Leticia apologized to the man who persistently asked what happened and tried to explain the situation in order to clear up the misunderstanding and restore calm. Woods explained that she had no special abilities and simply did not know the meaning of the strange word uttered by the prince. The lady could not decipher its meaning, which was the reason for the misunderstanding. Suddenly, as if illuminated by a flash of light, George came to the realization that his attention was focused on completely the wrong things, and that he needed to rethink what was happening around him. Sitting in the corner, the girl explained to the man that she did not know the meaning of the word ankylos, which the prince said, and that the difficulty was due to the fact that this word was completely unfamiliar to her. Rising from his seat, the knight asked if the little girl had ever been to a zoo, hoping to find out if she had experience with animals and how she reacted to them. A long time ago, Leticia heard that somewhere in the capital there was a zoo intended exclusively for the rich, where one could see rare animals and enjoy a luxurious atmosphere. Ankylos was a rare overseas beast that was not found in the empire. Obviously, the peasants had no idea about its existence since this animal was completely unknown to them. It turned out that in the past, the boy had discovered a similar beast in the palace and was extremely fascinated by it. This rare and unusual creature attracted his attention and aroused his sincere interest. The girl, with an upset expression on her face, realized that she and the ruler lived completely different lives, and what was ordinary and familiar to him was something completely unimaginable and alien to her. If the girl does not reduce the difference in their knowledge, a similar incident may repeat itself, and then her help to the boy will be useless since the lady will not be able to cope properly with the difficulties that arise. Taking the book, Jorge began to take notes on the beast to the best of his ability, carefully studying all available information and recording important information for further analysis. The result was a carefully crafted drawing of a green-fanged dinosaur, each detailed with attention to the smallest detail. Ultimately, Leticia came to realize exactly what the prince wanted to convey. Her understanding changed profoundly when she was able to connect his cryptic words with her newly acquired knowledge. The professor asked them questions about the lands and wondered why there were so many small states on the map, trying to understand the reasons for their existence and the reasons for such a significant fragmentation of territories. The girl explained that the drawing of the dinosaur depicted many ridges, which was reminiscent of the landscapes of the empire, with various mountains and hills, emphasizing the similarities between natural forms. Leticia went on to explain that in the empire the terrain changed depending on the territory, which is why there used to be so many small states. Baby apologized to Jorge for not performing her duties properly. This lack of preparedness could create problems and difficulties. The man could not continue to listen to the nonsense that the girl said, because he realized that she was actually doing an excellent job at everything. Woods began to cry, explaining that the teacher left because the lady could not correctly translate the prince's words. The tears were caused by the realization of how seriously this affected the situation. Kneeling before his master, Jorge offered to take responsibility for training the boys, hoping that his efforts would help provide the necessary support for their further development. Mikhail nodded, saying the word strawberry, which perhaps symbolized his agreement, adding an element of lightness and simplicity to the situation. A whole pile of books were neatly stacked on top of each other, creating the appearance of disarray, but at the same time demonstrating the wealth of knowledge and information hidden in these volumes. Leticia was surprised to realize that all of these books were intended for preschoolers, which unexpectedly changed her perception of their content and purpose, previously hidden behind the apparent complexity. Just as quickly, the little girl noticed the despondency of the knight who was sitting nearby worrying about his ward. Sympathetic to his anxiety, she tried to find a way to support and ease his anxiety. At this time, Mikhail sat immersed in reading a book, completely focused on its content and captivated by the process of studying, as if immersed in the world that opened before him on the pages. The knight did not understand what exactly the ruler did not like. Having heard the word paper, he assumed that the ruler did not like the quality of the books and began to think about the possible reasons for the dissatisfaction. Having understood why Mikhail did not read, the girl assumed that he simply did not know how to read letters, which explained the difficulty and lack of interest in the book. Approaching Jorge, she explained with gentle determination that the boy really could not read. This discovery shed light on all the problems that arose. The man's face expressed anger and hatred as he loudly ordered to find the teachers who were only pretending to teach the guy and urgently demanded to personally deal with them for their incompetence and deceit. Woods finally realized why the letters described George as a hot-tempered and angry person. Now the maiden clearly saw that his behavior and demands fully corresponded to this description. Leticia tried to stop the knight, but all her efforts were in vain. This anger was too great, and he was determined to act regardless of attempts to intervene. Jorge stopped only when the girl spoke words of consolation, claiming that he was not such a bad person after all, which allowed him to calm down a little and reconsider his behavior. Falling to his knees, the guard realized that he would spend the rest of his life crawling on his knees before the prince and asking forgiveness for his misdeeds, realizing the gravity of his situation and the need for atonement. Tears appeared on the face of such a serious man when he finally realized his mistake and decided to no longer obediently follow all the instructions of the emperor. Mikhail took his mentor's hand with a smile and tenderness, giving him comfort and support in this difficult moment, trying to ease his feelings and show his affection. Calmly, the boy said, "Sunshine," while his voice was full of confidence and lightness, as if this simple fact could dispel all worries and anxieties. Leticia hastened to translate what the boy meant. "Everything will be fine." The little girl tried to convey a calming message, assuring everyone that the situation would improve, and there was no need to worry. She could only watch the touching scene unfolding between the prince and his faithful friend, imbued with the warmth and sincerity of their mutual feelings. Wiping away his tears, Jorge decided that he should teach the heir the alphabet so that he could deal with similar situations in the future and develop his skills necessary for effective communication and study. Woods decided to take responsibility and start teaching the boy to read herself, realizing that direct participation would help him learn what he needed faster. The girl sat with the prince in the hall where books lay on the table, immersed in discussion and study of materials, which created an atmosphere of concentrated work. Woods's greatest surprise, the boy mastered the letters incredibly quickly, demonstrating amazing intelligence and diligence which inspired hope for further success. By reading a sheet of written letters, Leticia could easily read a sentence and understand its meaning, while others could not cope with this task and did not understand the content of the text. According to the plot, in a few years, Mikhail should have learned to speak normally, having overcome all difficulties and mastered communication skills at a high level. Sighing, the girl informed the ruler that her studies were completed and that now he should find a new qualified teacher. To the word rock, the lady replied that he was not moving anyway, implying that despite any efforts, the boy remained at one point. The word bed meant that he would not get out of it even if the teachers came to his bedroom, unless Woods was there to encourage him to act and motivate him. Smiling, the girl hastened to reassure the emperor, assuring the guy that she would always be there even during new classes and would support him at every step to ensure successful learning and comfort. Together, they sealed pinky promises in an ancient ritual that symbolized their mutual commitment and deep affection. Leticia said that she signed a contract which states that she is obliged to constantly be with the prince and fulfill all the duties assigned to her without leaving even for a minute. The ruler's face shone with joyful realization when he realized that the baby would be constantly next to him, providing constant support and assistance in any situation. Unable to contain his happiness, he hugged his companion tightly, feeling how his joy and gratitude overwhelmed him, and how her presence brought him great satisfaction and confidence. Awkwardly pushing the emperor away from her, Leticia said that she could not spend her whole life next to him, since there was a possibility that the maiden could die earlier. The lady just laughed at the prince's desire to be with her until the grave because he was only 10 years old, and the aristocrat understood that such promises at his age could simply be a naive expression of feelings. However, the face of the heir to the throne remained serious despite her laughter reflecting his sincere and deep feelings that did not diminish with age. Tessa returned to her students holding a book in her hands, and with a slight sternness in her voice, noted how long they had not met, as if reminding them of the time that had passed since their last meeting. The girl, with her usual modesty and trepidation, greeted the professor who entered the room with her kind words and a slight nod of her head. The woman learned about the boy's problems with reading and understanding the seriousness of the situation, decided to return to discussing this important problem. Before the lesson began, Tessa, with special attention and gentle insistence, asked Woods to focus on the upcoming lesson and listen carefully to every word. The girl did not understand the problem because her task was to simply sit and translate the boy's words without delving into the content and without participating in the discussion. The professor explained that even if the prince understood everything, the teacher would not be able to understand what Mikhail was thinking, since she needed a translator to catch all the nuances of his thoughts. Leticia has made a solemn promise that she will put in all her efforts and do absolutely everything possible to achieve all her goals with determination and dedication. The class ended late and Woods didn't understand anything, raising her hand almost every 5 minutes to try to get an explanation and understand the material. Georges, who unexpectedly appeared nearby, praised the lady for her excellent work with sincere delight and gratitude, emphasizing the significance of her efforts and achievements, which could not go unnoticed. Leticia asked the man for additional lessons, explaining that her desire was due to the feeling that she was dragging the prince down and wanted to improve her skills in order to support the boy at the proper level. After thinking about the request, the knight came to the conclusion that finding an additional teacher would not be a difficult task, and easily agreed. Although he had a proposal that could have been better to be more precise, it was to provide Woods with an admission ticket to the local library. Having heard about all the benefits that a room with books provides, Leticia could not resist the temptation and, showing keen interest, agreed to the offer. The next day, Mikhail, immersed in the atmosphere of the training hall, underwent intensive fencing training with his mentor, seeking to improve his skills and further master the intricacies of this noble art. The boy breathed heavily during the short rest, feeling his exhausted body gradually recover from the intense and exhausting training. While the guys were training hard on the court, the girl, watching them from afar, carefully followed their every move and carefully absorbed all the subtleties and details of their exercises, as if studying the art of craftsmanship. The sun shone brightly on the horizon. Its warm rays softly touched the graceful lady, dressed in a brand new pink dress, which wonderfully emphasized her elegance and charm. Soon she was approached by Georges, who stood next to her while the ruler repeated his movements with the sword, demonstrating skill and grace in every blow. The man could not understand how he had not thought of teaching the emperor how to use this weapon before, because it was so obvious and necessary for his training. Closing his eyes, he added that the boy could not sit quietly in the library, and preferred to be active, enjoying movement and adventure. Although in fact, Mikhail realized that mere skill with a sword was not enough to control this complex world. True control required deep knowledge and wisdom that went far beyond the martial arts. Subsequently, when the guy grows up and becomes an adult, he uses his fighting skills to go and destroy many lives following his path. Exhausted and devastated after a particularly difficult day, Mikhail sank into the arms of his bed, fully surrendering to the recuperation necessary to cope with further challenges. After a conversation with Jorge, the sweet girl was about to go to the library, eager to immerse herself in the world of knowledge and find answers to her questions among the endless rows of books. The knight wished her luck and said a warm farewell, watching her walk away towards the library, with determination and hope in her eyes. 3 months have passed since the maiden became the prince's translator. With a thoughtful expression on her face, Leticia walked down the corridor, holding a book under her arm, lost in thought about the upcoming study. To do her job effectively, she needed to get to know the ruler as well as possible. This was a difficult task, since the emperor's ability to deeply understand everything around him surprised even Professor Schuber. Tessa tried many times to drop everything and leave, but she was stopped by Woods, who explained what exactly the air was saying and why the work of a teacher is so important. Leticia was sincerely grateful to Jorge, who provided her with a ticket to the library. Without it, the salary could quickly run out and she would risk losing her job, which would be a very unpleasant outcome. Determined, the girl decided to study everything about politics in order to gain a deeper understanding of complex issues, and perhaps one day make her own contribution to this important field. Suddenly, the emperor appeared behind the girl with a smile, inviting her to his place. The little girl was amazed and excited to see him suddenly and so close. With a sly smile on his face, the boy was sincerely glad to meet Woods, experiencing great pleasure from this unexpected and pleasant meeting, which brought something special and unexpected to this day. Jumping up from her seat, Leticia began to ask what Mikhail was doing here, since he was supposed to be resting in his room and not be here at this time. The boy said the word orchid, and this simple but beautiful word filled the room with a gentle atmosphere, as if the flower itself came to life and reminded of its exquisite beauty. The girl realized that her friend sincerely missed her, and therefore could not wait until the morning to meet her and share his emotions and experiences. Leticia could not understand where the guards were looking, since they allowed their ward to roam freely without protection, violating all the rules of safety and discipline. Giggling, the boy said, "wizard," referring not only to the magical nature of the word, but also hinting at the special meaning that the term had in the context of their current adventures. Grabbing the emperor's hand, Woods demanded that they quickly return the master to their chambers, dissatisfied that he was out of his appointed place and could cause problems. It turned out that at such a young age the boy disappeared, deceived the servants, and snuck into the library to see his girlfriend and spend time with her, despite all the obstacles. Exhausted, Leticia stopped, and with weary determination said that she needed to rest in order to regain her strength and prepare for further tasks. The guy also stopped with an expression of thoughtfulness and to some extent anxiety in his eyes, looking into the distance as if trying to discern something important beyond the horizon. Realizing that the ruler was looking at the moon, the lady immediately realized that he was thinking about the brooch, which was associated with important memories or secrets of the past. Leticia herself could not believe how she could forget about something so important and significant, which turned out to be key to understanding the current situation and the emotions of the ruler. She lowered her head and, expressing deep regret, apologized to the emperor, saying that the brooch, despite its value, was only a small thing. With a slight smile on his face, Mikhail said the word rope, as if it were not just an ordinary word, but something meaningful, full of hidden meaning and importance. The Virgo hoped that if she remained close to the future man, she would be able to influence his fate and help him avoid the fate of becoming a cruel and bloodthirsty tyrant. In the meantime, Wood sought to protect the boy standing opposite him in the darkness of the night and tightly holding the future ruler's hand as if trying to convey her strength and support. In the morning, Leticia lay in bed feeling completely exhausted. She could barely get up, occasionally yawning sleepily, trying to muster the strength to start a new day. The excited maid quickly entered her mistress's chambers, anxiously shouting her name. The woman's voice trembled, and her face reflected concern for the well-being of the hostess. Rising from the bed, the little girl, with anxiety and excitement in her eyes, anxiously inquired about what had happened. The face expressed deep anxiety and a vague premonition of the importance of what had happened. Joyfully beaming, the maid hastened to share with those around her the long-awaited news that finally the prince had received the coveted invitation to a magnificent ball in the imperial palace, which he had been waiting for so long. When Woods inquired about the exact date of the ball, she was told that this significant and long-awaited event would take place in 10 days, filling the hearts of all those invited with anticipation. The little girl quickly realized that she would also have to attend the ball as the boy's interpreter, which added additional responsibility to her duties. Those present were completely delighted, as they had the opportunity to carefully prepare for this significant and solemn event, which created a truly magnificent atmosphere. Quietly, as if in a whisper, the woman invited her mistress to share secret information that was known only to her, doing this with special delicacy and grace. The houseworker stated that she found herself in exactly the same position as Leticia herself, which allowed her to better understand and sympathize with the current situation. With a smile on her face, Woods realized that she was not alone in her feelings, and admitted that she also really liked the maid, which brought special satisfaction and joy to the lady's heart. Regardless of what was happening, Horch entered the lady's chambers, dressed in a white suit that emphasized his elegance, and stood out against the background of the general atmosphere. With joy, the man rushed to the girl, expressing sincere gratitude to her for her efforts, which were rewarded with an invitation to the ball. This gratitude was sincere, and the knight could not hide his delight. Jorge said with a soft but confident intonation, so that she would leave all the difficulties and worries to the adults and focus solely on herself and her prince, without being distracted by other difficulties and worries. The baby was worried that the aristocrats might notice how the heir was unable to connect even 2 words, which could cast doubt on his abilities and reputation. The man reassured her, saying that the emperor had already taken care of everything, and would officially announce the heir's problems with a speech which would ensure understanding and support from everyone present. The girl seriously asked not to joke, so as not to distract the interlocutor, to which he replied with a smile that the words were not a joke at all, but a sincere and important statement. If Woods had not been there, this would not have happened, because in this case the ruler would have made the prince look like a fool. Thanks to the lady, the situation was mitigated and did not lead to such unpleasant consequences. The lady realized that she had an important role as a translator in maintaining the prince's image. Her task was not only to accurately translate, but also to create a favorable impression of the prince, which required special attention to detail. Jorge's behavior reminded the girl of her past, when she expected praise from her parents, but never received it. This feeling of unrequited gratitude and expectation of recognition deeply touched the little girl. There was only one reason why the current emperor invited the prince to the ball. The boy turned out to be smarter than originally thought. His intelligence and quick wit surprised the ruler, which prompted him to give the guy a chance. Mikhail achieved significant success, thanks in large part to his translator, whose assistance allowed him to effectively communicate close deals and achieve goals. Perhaps it would be better if the nobles learned of the prince's flaw and thought that he had no chance of becoming a contender for the throne like a broken brooch. However, the lady could not allow the good-natured and innocent boy to be trampled underfoot like a fragile flower just blooming at the very root, subjected to such a cruel fate. Leticia realized that she must invest all her strength and resources in ensuring that everything works out in the best way for the prince, and do everything possible to ensure his complete success and long-awaited well-being. Many people gathered in the spacious hall, who carefully and enthusiastically assessed the outfits, admiring every detail and exquisite design of the presented models. The awkward lady sternly and with some irritation reprimanded Woods for his extremely inappropriate behavior, which turned out to be completely unacceptable at such an important and elegant ball, where every gesture and word has a special meaning. But Leticia knew that sooner or later she would be forced to study dancing, since this skill was an invariable part of training and preparation for important events that invariably awaited in the future. Jorge immediately realized that the lady did not want to dance, because she did not know how to do it. With such a lack of skill, and given her female background, she would not have been able to confidently place her hand on her partner's shoulder. The little girl, who did not yet fully understand why she needed to master such a complex and sophisticated art, felt lost and confused. To this, the knight replied that if she does not start studying now, then it will definitely be useful to her in the future, when the lady faces new challenges and trials. Woods, dressed in a pink dress, decided to try to think positively despite the fact that she still needed to be constantly surrounded by the emperor. The boy was delighted with a bright expression of satisfaction on his face. What pleased him extremely did not make much of an impression on his beautiful companion. George approached the dance teacher with a proposal to pair the prince and the girl, so that their interaction would become easier and more comfortable for both. This idea appealed to the woman, who herself could not think of such a solution. She was grateful that the knight had come up with such a practical and smart solution. Smiling, the teacher explained that in this way it was possible to quickly learn a new skill, which would greatly simplify the learning process and make it more effective. Jorge added that Mikel had to master dancing, since it was likely that the current ruler himself would appoint a lady at the ball for his heir, and this could be an important aspect of the preparation. The guy had a sincere, angelic face, so attractive and charming that it was impossible not to succumb to his charm, as if his appearance itself was a magic spell. As a result, having no other choice, the girl agreed to try dancing with a boy, realizing that this might be her only option. Tired Leticia, due to fatigue and concentration on her dance movement, could not accurately count how many times she accidentally stepped on her partner's foot, which added considerable stress and embarrassment. The lady, feeling awkward, apologized to the guy for her mistakes, but Mikel replied with a kind smile that everything was fine, and that there were no problems. When asked what the prince said using the word tree, the girl looked away and lied that the prince was tired and would like to finish the dance quickly so as not to create unnecessary inconvenience. The man caught the girl's lie, noticing that the strange explanation was clearly untrue, and betrayed her attempt to hide the truth. With an upset expression on her face, the girl explained that the boy actually meant that he was very strong, and that the little girl could step on his foot at least 10 more times. It would not cause any discomfort. Leticia began dancing with the air again, taking it as an opportunity to improve her skills and regain her confidence despite previous failures. Stepping on her partner's foot again, the lady stopped and, sighing, said that she could no longer continue dancing like this, as it was bringing her too much disappointment. Adults supported the situation and sided with the boy, confirming that the lesson should continue despite the difficulties, as this is important for further learning and development. With a wave of his hand, Jorge suggested that she learn how to perform the movements correctly as quickly as possible if she did not want to hurt the prince. Barely able to stand on her feet from fatigue, Leticia realized that everyone around her was simply going crazy, and this feeling gave an additional feeling of isolation and alienation. When night fell and classes came to an end, the man escorting the girl to the exit asked her with interest if she planned to visit the library again that evening. Clutching her head from fatigue, Woods refused, explaining that due to extreme physical and emotional exhaustion, she was unable to go anywhere today. Realizing that the night was not at all as scary as she imagined in her fantasies, the lady asked the man to return the beautiful brooch that she had lost. When Jorge, silent and thoughtful, did not immediately react, the little girl, feeling the need to clarify the details, added that the decoration in question was in the shape of a lion. Clenching her fists with excitement, the girl added that it seemed to her that the prince would want her to wear this jewel to the ball, and this assumption only increased her anxiety. The man did not immediately believe the lady's words, and Leticia explained that this assumption came directly from the boy who himself expressed such a desire. Looking seriously at the lady, the elder asked if she knew the meaning of the brooch, emphasizing that this was the only symbol of the imperial family and was of particular importance and meaning. Before the boy received the status of heir, the jewelry came to him after the death of his father and became an important symbol of continuity and connection with the royal family. George also explained that if Woods appeared wearing this decoration in the capital, it would mean that she was declaring her affiliation with the imperial dynasty. The girl could not believe her happiness when she realized that such a precious piece of jewelry possessing inimitable grace and sophistication had been given to her by Mikhail. Moreover, the man was alarmed why exactly at that very moment when he was immersed in his thoughts, the baby suddenly demanded that thing. Having received this explanation, George realized the reason and admitted that he had been thinking for a long time about why Woods did not ask for the return of the brooch that he had previously taken from her. With his hands folded across his chest, he realized how deeply and carefully Leticia treasured this heritage like a precious symbol that was especially dear to her. The only thing that the knight could not comprehend was the strange and stupid expression on the face of the lady, who seemed to have completely forgotten what had happened in the Baron's house, as if all the confusion that had happened had never taken place. Leticia herself could not understand why she did not ask the man to return the brooch back because it was so important to her, and she could not explain to herself how she missed this moment. Jorge could not understand how anyone could forget about such a valuable treasure, which was of great importance and was associated with many important moments. Roughly and adamantly, the guard declared that this was not the answer he expected, and his disappointment was evident in every word, as if every word he uttered was imbued with a feeling of deep dissatisfaction. Finally, it dawned on the lady. This thing was dear to her since Mikhail himself gave it, and every glance reminded her of his tender care and tender affection. Every time in the most difficult moments, Leticia took this decoration into her hands and remembered the day when she met the prince who gave this precious gift. Smiling awkwardly, the girl admitted that all this time her thoughts were occupied with the boy, who despite the physical distance seemed so close to her as if Mikhail was always nearby. Accepting the answer, the man handed over the Woods brooch, doing so with a serious and respectful expression on his face, as if this gesture symbolized something important and meaningful. Jorge approvingly gave his permission, allowing him to go to the ball, accompanying him with his blessing, as if this important evening was filled with special meaning and significance. The guard recognized with understanding that Leticia could not remain in the shadows indefinitely, because her bright personality and inner light sought to break through, attracting the attention of others. Woods realized that no matter what she looked like, her personal charm and status would cause many to perceive the lady as a member of the imperial family. She won't have to defend her position as the Baron's niece. The surrounding aristocrats, including even members of the upper class, would bow their heads before the lady, acknowledging status and greatness. Clutching the brooch to herself, the girl thanked Jorge, but stated that she would not wear this jewelry to the ball, preferring to leave it for a more personal moment. The point was that Leticia did not plan to stay by the prince's side forever. The little girl realized that if she wore the jewel to the ball, it could mean an obligation to accompany the boy for the rest of his life. The knight objected that the lady always had the opportunity to terminate the contract at any time if circumstances changed or plans underwent drastic changes. According to the documents, the translator could leave the palace at any time, which ensured freedom of action and the ability to leave when she saw fit. The decoration was not just an ordinary gift from a ruler. Since ancient times, it has been considered the distinctive sign of the crown prince, symbolizing status and right to the throne. Therefore, Woods came to the conclusion that it was better to represent nothing than to be forever bound and limited, losing freedom and independence. George, having made the decision with understanding and respect, agreed with his choice. He left the place, leaving the lady space and time to think. The upset Leticia looked sadly after the departing man. The woman's gaze was full of regret and bewilderment, as if saying goodbye to something important and dear. A new day came, and the palace came to life again, filling with soft morning light and lively bustle, as if foreshadowing the beginning of new events and significant changes. While the maid carefully combed her red hair, Leticia learned that after the title was bestowed on the boy, the ball had already been held 6 times, which indicated the constant significance of this event in society. The little girl had a bad feeling. Even when the servants tried to calm her mistress, her anxiety did not subside, and she continued to feel that something might go wrong. The girl asked what would happen if she made a mistake, and the maid offered to tell a secret that could help avoid trouble and understand a difficult situation. Woods really was. The true origin and significance remain hidden from their eyes. Laughing heartily at the funny joke, Leticia thought with gratitude in her heart about how fate had given her the chance to meet such an exceptional and charming person as Ashley. Leticia looked stunning, sporting an ornate hair clip and a blue dress adorned with exquisite details that highlighted her unique style. Despite the fact that the girl asked to make her image more modest, she still stood out from the crowd with her unusual and vibrant presence. Ashley was sincerely happy with her joy, and with deep admiration called the hostess ideal because her kindness and care made this day truly unforgettable. Instead of waiting for the prince, the maiden decided to go to the ball on her own and approach her friend already in the building when he was solemnly presented. The little one remembered that Mikael had expressed a desire for them to enter together, but the lady was forced to admit that she could not satisfy all the child's whims. Suddenly, an adult lady approached her, expressing her concern, and inquired with interest where the guardian of such a young and sophisticated aristocrat was, which caused deep concern. Pressing the fan to her face, the noble woman squinted and with a slight mocking expression noticed that she had been watching Woods walk back and forth for half an hour completely without a companion. Leticia began to assure those around her that everything was absolutely fine, trying to instill in everyone calmness and confidence despite the existing doubts and worries. Looking down on the little girl, the aristocrat said that if she snuck into the palace out of curiosity, then it was not too late to leave it in order to avoid possible troubles. A cold sweat ran through the girl's body, and she felt deep confusion realizing that she absolutely did not want to participate in a conversation with representatives of high society, among whom she felt uncomfortable. The woman, noticing from the expression on the girl's face that her feelings and emotions were clearly reflected, took this as confirmation of her theory, and nodded with satisfaction. Leticia, not wanting to leave the event, resolutely said that she had an official invitation, which allows her to stay and enjoy the company without breaking the rules. The little girl could not answer the question about the presence of an invitation since she did not have one, and she simply remained silent, feeling awkward in this difficult situation. If the mention of the Baron were to come into conversation, the mature aristocrat would have many additional questions that would require careful discussion and clarification. Suddenly, the entire aristocracy froze in tense anticipation as the arrival of the future emperor was announced, a noble heir to the throne, whose appearance promised changes in the future. While the woman was absorbed in her worries and did not notice what was happening around, Leticia took advantage of the moment and, quickly accelerating, disappeared into the distance, leaving only a shadow behind her. When the noblewoman regained consciousness, it turned out that time had been lost. Woods had already managed to get lost in the crowded crowd, and the tracks were carefully disguised, which made detection difficult. Everyone watched with interest the handsome prince accompanied by Jorge, assuming that the boy was naive and stupid, not realizing what secrets he might be hiding. The men discussed behind the ruler's back, expressing the opinion that it was impossible to make an emperor out of an idiot, while condemning and critically assessing his abilities. The girl waited with deep sincerity and hope for the appearance of the current lord. believing that this moment would give her the long-awaited opportunity to fulfill her destined role. A full hour had already passed since Mikael appeared in the hall, but no one was in a hurry to introduce the new translator, leaving the lady in a state of uncertainty and anticipation. The noble guests could not help but notice that the host of the ball was late, which caused them some concern, and became the subject of lively discussions among the invitees, fueling the intrigue of the evening. But this was the first time Mikael attended the event, and his presence added special excitement and an indescribable atmosphere to this significant event. Leticia looked at her friend with deep compassion, recognizing that he needed support to confidently interact with other nobles and not feel isolated. Jorge also had no right to intervene until the emperor arrived, emphasizing the importance of following protocol and waiting until the key moment to make decisions. Time dragged on inexorably, and although many were already bored from the long wait, no one dared to show their irritation or leave the hall before the bishop arrived so as not to break the rules. Finally, a venerable old man arrived, who with deep regret reported that the ruler unfortunately was forced to miss this important ball due to his illness, which caused disappointment among those present. Approaching the messenger, Horsch, with slight doubt and deep respect, asked whether they should suspend the event given the importance and consequences of the Lord's absence. The servants answered in the negative, adding that the crown prince should take care of the continuation of the evening, since his role in organizing the ball was no less important. This caused horror in Woods, who without hiding her concern realized that the poor boy would have to get out and cope with the situation without help and support. Bowing his head, the knight had no choice but to obey the order of his master, despite his internal experiences and difficulties. Leticia thought about whether she should intervene, thinking about the possible consequences and how her actions could affect the current situation. It was obvious that the emperor had deliberately added this element to heighten the tension and create additional complications, as if his every move had been carefully planned to test everyone to their limits. It was originally planned that Mikael, who has an extraordinary mind, would be able to communicate effectively with the help of a translator, which would allow him to overcome language barriers and successfully interact with others. However, without Woods, the aristocracy noticed that the boy did not exchange a word with anyone, not even Horsch, which caused wariness and questions. And even if Leticia tried to explain that only she understands the prince, it is unlikely that anyone would believe her given the current situation and lack of trust. The lady also realized with alarm that this sophisticated and cunning plan was carefully planned to bend the truth and create difficulties for the prince's guard. Horsch is treated as a fraud. His reputation will plummet, causing irreparable damage to his status and respect in society. However, if this had happened, it would certainly have been mentioned in the novel that Woods was reading, and would likely have caused widespread discussion and condemnation. It followed from this that the knight would definitely find a way to correct the situation and restore his image, despite all the difficulties and difficult circumstances. When Jorge turned to the prince, the boy did not say a word, continuing to remain silent and avoid communication, which added even more tension to the situation. Kneeling down on one knee, the knight expressed his concern by asking whether Mikael could cope with managing the entire ball, which was now in his hands. The man, with warmth and confidence in his voice, convinced the boy that he would succeed, assuring him that through perseverance and self-confidence he could overcome any difficulties. The thought that the emperor had finally recognized the heir clouded Jorge's eyes, and now the young ruler had to suffer on the throne, immersed in difficult trials and difficulties. As soon as Leticia suddenly intervened, approaching the man, the situation immediately took a new turn, and her presence became a key moment in the development of events. The presence of the embarrassed girl unexpectedly calmed Horsch, and he felt the internal tension gradually begin to recede. At that moment, a loud voice called out to the guard, and a handsome young man with perfect facial features and incredible hair slowly approached him, attracting the attention of the entire hall. His name was Duke Per, and he surprisingly resembled a subordinate prince, which attracted even more attention to his appearance. Everyone in the room had their eyes glued to the young man as he slowly and majestically approached the throne, and each of them watched with tense anticipation as events unfolded. With a grin on his lips, Per asked not to address him in such a stern tone, assuring that he was ready for anything and did not need unnecessary formality. Having bowed politely before the prince, the guy respectfully asked how the heir to the empire was doing, demonstrating his sincere attention and concern for his well-being. Mikhail responded with silence, which was his constant and characteristic way of reacting in such situations, thereby emphasizing his constant determination and inner resilience. With a mocking expression on his face, the nephew asked his uncle about the rumors, which turned out to be true, while not hiding his pleasure at the revelation. Per understood that the prince must have been very worried, especially considering that the young man had been leading balls for about 10 years, and this long practice gave his words special significance. Approaching his old relative, the guy invited him to return back to the family, trying to offer support and restore lost ties. Jorge had long ago severed ties with the family line, but it seems that the older brother could not let go of the younger brother so easily, still hoping for the restoration of family relations and reconciliation. Moreover, the man realized that this whole performance was only part of a plan aimed at bringing him back to his family, and now he has to deal with the true motives of what is happening. Leticia, until recently, could not believe that the guard's relative turned out to be a duke who became famous in history for his outstanding achievements, and this unexpected discovery surprised her to the core. If the man had refused, he could have lost not only his title, but also his life, and if he had agreed, he would have endangered not only the maiden, but also his ward, plunging them all into the abyss of danger and complex consequences. And in general, who knew maybe in the novel, Jorge also took the hand of the duke's family, thus saving his life and ensuring his safety despite difficult circumstances. But to the lady's surprise, the knight refused the offer, leaving everyone in disbelief and becoming the subject of discussion due to his unexpected choice. The nephew had no choice but to accept his uncle's choice, accepting his decision and realizing that it was the best he could do in the current situation. Suddenly, Jorge got down on one knee, and rumors and loud discussions erupted among the aristocracy, vigorously discussing this unexpected act and its possible consequences. Bowing his head, the man stated that the emperor must have known about his crime, but now wanted to personally take full responsibility and confess everything. Per, excited, asked what nonsense Jorge was saying, not believing the words he had just uttered, and trying to understand the true reasons for such behavior. Instead of answering, the knight turned to everyone around him, noting that they must have heard about the prince's dementia, emphasizing the strangeness and inconsistency of what was happening. The man loudly admitted that he personally unraveled all these performances, taking all the blame upon himself and demonstrating his readiness for responsibility. Leticia fearfully thought about how to stop the knight so that he would not destroy himself because of his actions, which could lead to irreparable consequences. Instead, Mikhail had a sharp mind and insight like his father, but simply skillfully hid these qualities from others. The aristocrats immediately began to condemn the man for his vile act, not containing their outrage and indignation, and their criticism only intensified as the news spread among the nobility. Jorge continued to play the role of the villain, adding that the heir did have speech problems, which only strengthened his image and added fuel to the fire of discussions. The middle-aged man asked in bewilderment if this meant that the prince was mute, and there was a mistrust in his voice that was hard to miss. The guard explained that the heir's speech was so illegible and difficult to understand that only those who were close to him could catch and understand its true meaning. By playing the role of a villain, Jorge only aggravated the current situation, trying to justify the prince and present him as a genius, despite his own failures and failures. Persistent nobles, never tired of questions, demanded explanations from the guard about the real purpose of the guy's actions, trying to find out what cunning plan he had started and what was behind his evil plans. With a smirk on his face, the man stated that his goal was nothing more than to strip the young man of his title, which would be a real blow to his pride. Rumors floating around the boy claimed that he was completely unworthy to take the throne of the emperor, and that Jorge was a man capable of the most base and vile acts. The frightened Leticia, overcome with horror and unable to comprehend what was happening around her, desperately pressed her hands to her mouth, as if trying to suppress sudden fear and disbelief. Arrogantly, the man asked his nephew if he wanted him to go to prison himself, hinting at his superiority and contempt, as if every word was filled with confident mockery. Angrily, Père gave the order to immediately arrest the impudent man who dared to disrupt order and show insolence, demonstrating complete disregard for established laws and authority. Many men immediately rushed towards the knight to take him into custody and prevent him from leaving, violating all standards of order and respect. Jorge was eventually arrested by the guards, who with exceptional promptness and determination carried out their duty with complete devotion in maintaining the strict observance of law and order. Leticia could not read lips, however. Despite this, she managed to understand the man. Before leaving the room, he repeated the phrase that he had often uttered before. The aristocrats could not believe that such a noble and respected man dared to contradict the emperor and oppose the crown, violating the prescribed norms and traditions. Mikhail was left sitting alone on the throne, immersed in silence. His gaze focused, his thoughts gliding along the edge of deep thought. Père was deeply disappointed because he accepted the emperor's offer with only one goal: to return his uncle to the family. Now, when the goal turned out to be unattainable, his disappointment became even more acute and painful. Turning around, the man pretended that the relative did not exist at all, as if the guard simply did not exist in this world, and continued his work with an expression of complete dispassion and indifference. Although the guy failed to achieve the desired result, it was enough for him to carry out the emperor's decree in order not to be at a loss and to maintain his position and respect. The ruler's orders were to isolate the prince, completely limiting his contact with the outside world and removing him from anyone who could influence his situation. Due to Jorge's talent, rumors began to spread that Mikhail was much smarter than he first appeared. These conversations quickly circulated behind the scenes, highlighting the hidden depths of his intellect. The ruler, intently playing chess, did not show the slightest leniency towards the pawns, whose moves, violating his carefully thought-out plans, threatened his strategy. Now the young man's goal was to make the prince look like a fool and a frightened child in the eyes of the courtiers. He sought to humiliate him as much as possible in order to create the image of an incompetent and weak heir. Suddenly, when Père was about to continue his speech, he was interrupted by another voice, the voice of a prince who unexpectedly uttered the word messenger. This short but meaningful word burst into the silence, attracting everyone's attention. Plucking up her courage, Leticia decided that the time had come to enter the game. Her resolve strengthened, and she realized that she could no longer remain on the sidelines because the time had come to act. Loudly, so that everyone present in the hall could hear her, the lady said that the prince said that the ball was not yet over. Her voice echoed throughout the room, causing everyone to turn around. Père, plunged in deep bewilderment, turned to this impudent girl with obvious confusion, trying to find out what exactly she meant by her cryptic and possibly provocative statement. She boldly defended her point of view, confidently demonstrating that she not only correctly understood the emperor's words, but was also fully aware of their meaning. The man mockingly asked how she could do this, to which the lady explained that the boy pointed to a messenger who had recently entered with important news from the ruler. Emphatically and with obvious irritation, Leticia asked how anyone could dare to defy the will of the Empire family, since such an act insulted the very essence of their power and status. Père, embarrassed and somewhat at a loss, asked the prince how to punish the impudent woman who dared to lie so that she would understand the seriousness of her act. The future emperor succinctly responded with only the word foam, which, although it seemed simple, actually carried a deep and multi-layered meaning, leaving the listeners in thought. Smiling, The guy latched on to this word, noting that Mikhail was stupid if he did not understand the deep meaning inherent in such a simple at first glance expression. But Per was again interrupted by the lady who explained the meaning of the word. The little girl explained that the aristocrat asked too many questions, the essence of which spread and disappeared like foam. Awkwardly, the young man asked who this lady was, who dared to insult the Duke, unable to understand how she could so shamelessly violate etiquette and show such obvious disrespect. Holding her hand to her chest, Leticia proudly called herself one of the few who could understand the true meaning of the prince's speech, confident in her unique gift of interpreting his words. The aristocrat who had previously spoken out against Woods added that she saw this impudent woman wandering around the hall unaccompanied, demonstrating a clear disrespect for accepted norms and rules. The woman added that Leticia was like the boy's personal servant, clearly hinting at a humble origin and subordinate position, which made her insolence even more unacceptable. Noble people immediately began to discuss the girl's young age and her apparently modest origins, doubting that she could come from a wealthy family and was even more worthy of their attention. Suddenly, unexpectedly for everyone, Mikhail rose from the throne and confidently approached the lady standing next to her, thereby forcing everyone present to fall silent in anticipation of his next step. Tirelessly, each time more and more insistently, he continued to repeat the word foam, as if this simple word contained a deep and important meaning that he wanted to convey to all those gathered. Continuing to skillfully play her role, the girl said that the prince considered the words of the courtiers unworthy of his attention, emphasizing that their chatter was as insignificant as that very foam. After this, the boy with obvious approval pronounced the word stone, thereby confirming that Leticia correctly conveyed his thoughts, comparing the interpretation to something solid and unshakable. Persistently, the boy continued to repeat the word sword, waiting for Woods to translate it, emphasizing the importance of this symbol and making it clear that the true meaning of his words requires an accurate and correct interpretation. Leticia was the only one who could help the guy communicate with others, serving as a kind of bridge between his mysterious words and those who tried to understand them. If a boy is disappointed in his girlfriend, he will lose his only support in this cruel world, remaining lonely and defenseless in the face of many dangers and intrigues. But Jorge was the only one who was ready to give his life for his master, showing exceptional devotion and loyalty in the most difficult moments. Therefore, she continued to translate the words of the prince, who stated that the statements of the knight under arrest had nothing to do with himself. Various rumors began to spread throughout the hall, mixing and distorting like waves in a stormy sea, causing increasing excitement among those present. The aristocrats listened with fascination, as the heir justified his subordinate, claiming that he had always supported him in difficult moments, for which the prince was deeply grateful and highly valued his loyalty. Mikhail himself considered Jorge's arrest unjust, and sincerely hoped that the man would soon be released, believing in his innocence and the justice of what was happening. Noble people did not intend to so hastily trust the strange girl, who would soon turn out to be a simple deceiver, passing off her own words as the statements of the future ruler. Leticia confirmed that she was a commoner with no higher education, and her background did not allow her to claim the knowledge and status associated with noble persons. And if so, then how could a simpleton like her distort the words of the heir to the throne? Mikhail could well have refuted Woods's words, but did not do so, leaving questions unanswered. This convinced the people of high society, who realized that a girl from the common people could hardly have composed something like that on her own, and therefore her words were trustworthy. Awkward and confused, Per watched as the aristocrats began to side with Woods, realizing that their support was dramatically changing the course of events and calling his own actions into question. So he asked a provocative question, wondering if the boy really had a genius mind, trying to reveal the true nature of the abilities and raise doubts about the prince's talent. Suddenly Tessa appeared, who could answer the question regarding the origin of Jorge, attracting everyone's attention with her knowledge and awareness. The professor loudly stated that for the past few months she had been training the heir to the throne, emphasizing the importance of her work and its contribution to the preparation of the future ruler. People immediately recognized her as a highly qualified specialist who, after her divorce, completely immersed herself in research and became a famous scientist known for her outstanding achievements in the field of science. The woman explained that she taught the prince politics and history, and that he mastered all the subjects so quickly and successfully that he was in no way inferior to the students of the academy, demonstrating outstanding abilities and a deep understanding of the material. Pear already knew about this and therefore asked whether the lady and the prince were in written communication, to which he received a negative answer, which excluded the possibility of using notes and documents to confirm their interaction. Jorge's nephew referred to the fact that it simply seemed to the old lady that the heir understood something from the program, despite the fact that he himself could not really speak or write. This made the professor smile, and the woman called the man the only fool in this place, indicating his inability to understand the complexity of the situation and appreciate the merits of the heir. Pear openly laughed at Woods, who was a commoner, and in his opinion could not even hold a candle to him, showing his disdain for her origin and social status. When asked about the veracity of the information about the prince's training, Tessa answered in the affirmative, putting her reputation on the line, and ordered not to offend the prince's companion, emphasizing her determination and willingness to protect the lady. Ladies of noble birth trusted the professor, who was able to expand and strengthen the empire, believing that she had no reason to lie and recognizing her services to the prosperity of the state. The aristocrat was outraged by the behavior of those around him, but could not go against the will of the majority, realizing that his own opinion would be useless in the light of the collective decision. It was clear that Leticia did not have as extensive knowledge as the future ruler, but she nevertheless did a good job accurately translating the prince's words and demonstrating her skills in this important matter. As a result, Pear found himself at a disadvantage when everything was against him, including the famous professor, who supported the others and helped strengthen their position. Realizing the comical nature of the situation, the guy could not contain himself and began to laugh loudly, realizing the absurdity of what was happening and his own loss in this game. Loudly, the man addressed the dear aristocrats, asking if they believed this outright lie, highlighting the clear discrepancy between their perception and the actual situation. Trying to clear his name, the guy asked about the woman's debts, hoping to find out how much her financial situation could affect her reputation and the accuracy of her words. In an attempt to disgrace the teacher, Pear suggested that Tessa was only in a relationship with Jorge to get rid of debts and pay them off, calling into question the lady's true motives and honesty. She insisted that the boy sitting on the throne was not such a fool, highlighting his intelligence and lack of respect from those around him. The man continued to try to put the situation in his favor, but it was all useless. The noble people remained silent, not giving any response and ignoring his attempts. Tessa went to Woods and the ruler of the empire, eager to discuss the situation and express her thoughts directly in order to resolve the misunderstandings that had arisen. She politely asked the boy if he had made any mistakes during his training, hoping to receive a frank and complete answer for further improvement. Leticia translated the words of the prince, who noted that although he remembers his past at the moment, he no longer has any complaints or grievances, and the guy is ready to look into the future with a pure heart. Grinning, the lady asked how an ordinary commoner could know about a city that had disappeared many years ago, indicating how smart the emperor was. Moreover, in exchange for a refutation of the accusations made against the professor, the woman was ready to tell how her debts arose. The guy could not find words, as if the gift of speech had disappeared from him and he was gripped by fear, not knowing how to express his feelings and thoughts at that moment. Smiling slyly, the woman caught the young man in his own trap, asking why he presented everything in such a negative light and did not explain the situation from a more positive point of view. The teacher added that her debts arose due to the high cost of valuable research she carried out, which required significant financial investments. Famous people respected the lady who was soon, it was said, going to become a countess, and did not want to contradict one who contributed to the expansion of the empire's territories. Casually, the lady mentioned that she had very good connections who were ready to provide support in expensive research, helping to cover significant costs and providing the necessary financial assistance. After this, she added that it was Jorge who provided her with significant financial assistance, showing not only generosity, but also real kindness, supporting the aristocrat in difficult times. Per realized that he had lost this battle, and then spent the rest of the evening in silence, immersed in his thoughts and reflections. Night fell, and its dark but enchanting embrace gradually enveloped the large house, illuminating it in the dim light of the moon, and creating an atmosphere of mysterious comfort. Leticia reflected on the condition of Jorge, whose fate remained uncertain, and anxiously reconsidered all the events that could affect his future. Tessa could do was to escort the lady and the prince back to the palace, providing them with all the necessary support and care to make their return as comfortable as possible. Leticia wanted to stop the professor from staying with them, but the lady replied that it would be much more useful if she remained free outside the castle where she could continue her work and help. The girl understood that among the palace servants there were spies sent by Jorge's nephew, which caused her anxiety and concern about safety and trust in this environment. The woman confirmed this, adding that the wards should trust only each other, emphasizing the importance of internal cohesion and caution in conditions of covert surveillance. The lady explained that together they had moved one step closer to the crown, but their lives were now in danger. They should have switched to silverware and been on alert even at night so as not to become victims of a conspiracy. Also, the boy should have already given the rank and title to his assistant, considering her invaluable contribution and dedication shown throughout the work. The little girl was furious when she was offered the idea of imagining a girl as a boy's bride, since it seemed completely inappropriate and ridiculous. Regrettably, Mikhail inappropriately and unexpectedly uttered the word horse to his companion, which caused her a deep feeling of awkwardness and slight disappointment. To this, Leticia responded with complete sincerity that she could not become the heir's bride, since such high demands and expectations did not correspond to true feelings and principles of life. Soon the carriage returned to its native estate, leaving behind a long dusty path and marking the end of a long and exhausting journey that has become part of history. Also sadly, the boy noted that in this case Leticia could become his secretary, which sounded like an unattainable alternative to his expectations. But in that world, the closest confidants of ordinary people who did not have a title were actually called secretaries, and recently it has become fashionable for aristocrats to keep such people with them. With a serious and concentrated expression on her face without wasting a minute of thought, Leticia decisively agreed to accept this responsible position, realizing the significance and severity of the assigned responsibilities. A full month has passed since Jorge was relieved of his duties, and during this time the palace has taken on a new life filled with fresh beginnings and changes. Fortunately, the man was not executed, but he had to quickly leave the capital. At this time, combing her hair, the maid asked the lady if she was ready to go out for a walk in the garden, and having received consent, began preparations. While creating her hair, Ashley asked the hostess to dress warmly with her contagious enthusiasm and positive mood that the maid radiated. In addition, a basket with warm tea with lemon was packed for the trip in case the lady felt cold and froze, to ensure her comfort and coziness in any situation. Leticia was pleasantly surprised by the care and dinner from the servant, while she added that if the prince did not like the taste of the tea, the lady would be ready to do everything possible to rectify the situation and satisfy his taste preferences. Caught in a lie, the maid awkwardly tried to lie that she had not prepared dinner, but her attempt to hide the truth only increased her embarrassment. Leticia did not argue for long, and decided to go and check things in the kitchen herself after the walk to make sure everything was in order with the prepared dinner. Quietly and peacefully, the girl walked along the corridor of the house, which after the disappearance of Mr. Jorge was empty and covered with a thick layer of dust, creating a feeling of abandonment and time standing still in this place. Stopping at the door of the prince's chambers, Wood stated her full name and stated the purpose of her coming, trying to convey to those present the essence of her visit. Hearing that a companion had come to them, the door was opened by Mikhail himself, who was sincerely glad to see the lady. His face lit up with a happy smile, and he greeted the baby with genuine delight, showing all his joy from this meeting. During the absence of his mentor, the boy took on the responsibility of filling out the documentation, showing responsibility and diligence in completing this important task. It was a heavy burden for both of them to deal with adult matters that required maturity and responsibility, which they faced despite their young age. Also a big problem was the insufficient amount of finances, since they spent more than they received from the emperor, which created a noticeable financial strain. At this point, Leticia realized that all this time, Jorge had been supporting the prince's palace from his own pocket, covering expenses that could not be compensated in any other way. To prevent Mikhail from looking uneducated and clumsy in the eyes of others, the guard hired many servants and the best teachers, trying to create an atmosphere of sophistication and nobility around him. In addition to this, they were able to cut costs by firing some of the servants, among whom rumors began that they were soon planning to get rid of the heir, which caused additional anxiety and tension. Leticia and the boy tried to keep the remaining maids, but they, realizing that there were no more prospects and opportunities for themselves in this place, left following their own desire. It is likely that in the end only Mikhail and Woods will be left. However, despite this, she will always follow Jorge's orders to take care of the ruler, remaining true to her duty and responsibility. The lady went to her lord and friend, realizing that the knight's words and his intentions had bound her to him forever, and the girl could not now turn away from her devotion and duty. Smiling, the girl walked towards the heir to the throne with determination and grace, holding in her hands a basket filled with carefully selected items, symbolizing her respect and devotion. Mikhail, having no appetite, expressed his displeasure, which in turn negatively affected his mood and perception of current events, giving them an even darker cast. Woods reprimanded the boy, emphasizing that even if he didn't have much desire to eat, he still needed to eat to stay strong and healthy. The boy, not without harm, uttered the word frame, while expressing his stubbornness as if he were a real sheep firmly standing on his opinion. The girl began to worry that Mikhail began to eat much less. Even though the doctor assured him that this would not affect his health, the lady still wanted him to eat normally and take care of himself. While straightening the emperor's carefully ironed clothes, Leticia inquired with curiosity and concern whether he planned to go for a walk that day, hoping to learn about his intentions and routine. Having received confirmation from the guy, the lady, with relief and joy, finally offered to hit the road, ready to begin her plans and enjoy the upcoming journey. The two of them moved along a deserted corridor where silence and a sense of solitude reigned, giving their steps special significance. When the steps of the guards were heard behind them in the silence of the corridor, the boy suddenly quickened his pace, which slightly surprised and frightened his companion, causing an expression of anxiety and concern in her eyes. The prince remained silent as other people appeared in their presence, remaining calm and unperturbed, despite the increased number of interlocutors and the bustle going on around him. This was due to the professor's words in the carriage, when he noted that no one in the castle should be trusted, which made the prince remain wary. The teacher turned out to be right, despite the fact that the rest of the servants left the castle. The emperor's spies remained and continued to monitor what was happening, which confirmed her fears. Leticia could not leave the ruler completely alone, since her constant presence was not only a support for him, but also an invaluable source of support and consolation in difficult times. The only thing the lady could hope for was that the walk would at least slightly lift the mood of the gloomy guy, giving him the opportunity to escape from gloomy thoughts and enjoy the fresh air. Awkwardly trying to diffuse the tense situation, she began the conversation by noting that the weather today was simply magnificent, and this was the best time to take a pleasant walk outside enjoying the sun and silence. Turning to security, Woods said that the boy would like to be alone with her, and therefore they should move away so as not to interfere with their conversation and provide the necessary space for communication. To great surprise, the guards succumbed to the girl's requests and with deep respect bowed low to her, demonstrating complete obedience and benevolence. Apparently, everyone believed that Woods was the only one capable of controlling the heir to the throne, and therefore the attitude towards her changed from negative to positive. Before the girl appeared in the palace, Mikhail had repeatedly and deftly escaped the strict control of the guards, masterfully avoiding their gaze and endlessly attentive supervisory actions. And now those who remained in the palace were worried and afraid that the boy would again become as unpredictable and uncontrollable as he was before the arrival of the ruler's secretary, which could disrupt the newly established order and stability. Since the servants could not understand their master, misunderstandings often arose due to this, and for this reason the prince often escaped from their control, which led to additional problems and worries. Leticia asked the emperor to slow down so that they could move at a calmer and more measured pace, allowing them to better assess the situation. Eventually, he led the companions to a huge shelf filled with books, where each canvas represented a whole world of knowledge and stories waiting to be discovered. Woods herself soon revealed the secret of the prince's disappearances. It turned out that he simply knew about the existence of secret passages that allowed him to easily and quietly leave his premises, avoiding detection. The first time the girl was terribly scared and categorically refused to go into the dark passage, preferring to stay in the light, where she felt much more confident and protected. However, she eventually learned to trust the boy who, after losing Jorge, who had become like a father to him, began to suffer from paranoia and constant feelings of anxiety, which made him even more vulnerable and in need of support. Taking with her a dying candle, Leticia carefully followed the running and slyly smiling prince, trying not to lose sight of him in the dim light and rapid movement. The candle Leticia held in her hand did not emit much light, and its dim flicker only faintly illuminated the dark corners of the passage. Tired of the constant tension, the girl once again asked her friend to walk more slowly so as not to trip or fall. Suddenly, in the middle of the road, a whole pile of skeletons and bones appeared, as if the darkness had collected them and piled them in an untidy heap, creating a terrifying and unexpected obstacle for anyone who dared to continue on their way. Frightened, the girl asked the boy to return to her, full of anxiety and despair, since a feeling of security and confidence was most important to her at that moment. But the guy didn't feel any fear. He, raising the skull, calmly said something about treasures, demonstrating amazing calm and confidence, despite the bones surrounding him. The lady realized that he had begun to search for something among the remains, and the only question was, what exactly he hoped to find in this terrible pile of bones and debris. The modest secretary quietly watched as her boss, deep in thought, tried to find something important and significant in the bones. Woods watched with interest as Mikhail, bending over the floor, picked up something unusual from it, and then, holding it in his hand, carefully examined the object, which clearly had some kind of significance. When asked to show what he had just found, the boy shook his head negatively and, hiding the treasure behind his back, tried to hide his precious find, clearly not wanting to share it with others. Leticia took a deep breath, realizing that despite her best efforts, she would not be able to force him to reveal the secret of what exactly he had discovered. The dissatisfied boy uttered the word rain, thereby not only expressing his dissatisfaction, but also unintentionally offending his companion, whom he called with this word. Realizing that it was useless to argue with the prince, the girl suggested taking a lunch break and enjoying lemon tea in order to calm down and discuss everything in a calmer environment. The lady, noticing the boy's dirty hands, asked him if there was a place here where he could wash his hands in order to tidy them up and make him feel more neat. Trying to give the impression of an intelligent person, Mikhail pointed to the sun, confident that there must certainly be water in the garden that could refresh and improve the situation. Realizing that his companion did not like the place with bones, the prince added that in addition to this, the castle also has a cozy library where you can find peace and interesting books. Mikhail was ready to show the way, since he knew this place very well and was confident that he could easily lead his companion to where she would be comfortable. As a result, Leticia agreed to the adventure proposed by the heir to the throne, while warning him to be careful and not get caught, since their whole venture depended on it. In addition, she clearly understood that if the servant saw the dirty gentleman, a barrage of questions would immediately begin for his secretary, which would create additional inconvenience and problems. Woods understood that no one cared about the poor boy, but she still did not want anyone else to see him in an unkempt state, knowing that this could cause unnecessary conversations and attention. Leticia sought to ensure that in the eyes of its subjects, Mikhail remained an example of an ideal and impeccable prince, and not a figure who could hardly be kept afloat, and who only caused regret and doubt. It was for this reason that the girl continued to stay close to the boy, caring for him and supporting him so that he would not become an object of ridicule and would not lose his honor in the eyes of others. The maids, focused on their daily duties, walked along the spacious corridor, holding neatly folded fresh linen in their hands and animatedly discussing pressing issues and upcoming tasks. Following the guy, Leticia noticed that his movements were unusual and cautious. He skillfully avoided unnecessary attention, deftly hiding in the shadows and trying to remain invisible in the surrounding space. The 10-year-old boy hid behind a massive column, listening intently for every slightest noise that might give away his location. His eyes carefully observed his surroundings. Not keeping up with the fast-moving gentleman, Leticia, having difficulty catching up with him, stumbled and ran along the road, holding a heavy basket filled with a variety of food in her hands, trying not to miss an important moment. As a result, Mikhail led his companion to a new carefully hidden secret passage which could become their salvation, or the key to solving the whole mystery. Turning to Woods with a smile, the boy, full of desire to surprise her again with some secret mechanism, invited her to enter first, but the lady, not succumbing to the trick, insisted that he go into the passage first. The lady was well aware of all the prince's tricks and did not allow herself to be deceived by his pretty eyes, since she was already familiar with his cunning plans and tricks. Suddenly, Leticia froze, noticing how tears involuntarily rolled down the cheeks of her good friend, and the woman's heart was seized with deep sadness watching this touching and inexpressibly moving scene. Handing the prince a handkerchief with a soft and gentle expression on her face, Woods pleadingly asked him not to cry, trying to console and support him at this moment of deep sadness and emotional stress. However, the boy only pulled away the outstretched hand, refusing to accept help, and continued to hide his emotions. This was probably their first serious quarrel, which exacerbated internal feelings and bitterness. But for the first time, Mikhail shed tears in her presence, and faced with this unexpected manifestation of vulnerability, she found herself in complete confusion, not knowing how to act correctly in such a difficult situation. As a result, the boy silently turned around and went forward first, leaving the little girl alone with her thoughts and feelings, which took time to understand. Leticia was left alone, immersed in confusion and anxiety, wondering whether she had touched the master's deepest feelings with her behavior, and whether she had caused him unnecessary pain which she was trying to avoid. The candle burned softly and dimly, illuminating the dark passage, while creating a mysterious play of shadows on the walls, which added an atmosphere of mystery and peace to the surrounding space. Woods followed her master. She realized that her words had truly caused him deep distress and pain, and she now realized how seriously she had offended him. All this time the maiden was thinking about how to calm the angry and offended boy, trying to find words or actions that could soften his bitterness and restore peace and harmony. Woods was glad that she let the prince go ahead, since she herself was terribly afraid of the dark and could not cope with this fear in the company of him. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the distance of the tunnel, which despite its remoteness attracted attention and brought a spark of hope into the dark space, reminding that something better could be hiding behind this darkness. A magnificent fountain appeared ahead from the streams of water flowing pure freshness, surrounded by graceful stone angels, creating an atmosphere of peace and indescribable beauty. A tremulous smile imperceptibly blossomed on the girl's face, and her eyes shone with sincere joy, as if reflecting the light of the happiest moments of her life. Mikhail, instead of just enjoying the picturesque view, intently watched the reaction and sincere happiness of his companion, noting every manifestation of sincere delight. The place surrounded by exquisite stone aristocrats and majestic waves was indescribably charming, like the embodiment of exquisite beauty and grace. The lady realized that the boy was eager not only to show her this wonderful moment, but also to sincerely share his deep admiration, wanting to share with her every moment of joy that he experienced. Without hesitation, the little girl apologized to the master, realizing that she now fully understood why the master insistently asked to step forward, and recognizing how important it was to follow his instructions in order to appreciate the true meaning of the moment. However, for the lady, this place remained just as wonderful, even if she saw it only from behind her friend, as if every detail of the surrounding world was shrouded in magic. Smiling, the boy tenderly pressed himself against the long hair of his companion, feeling how they softly touched his cheeks, as if giving him the warmth and comfort of closeness. Hearing such a compliment, Woods couldn't help but remember how her own brother constantly teased her sister for her strange-colored hair, which seemed to only bother her and make her feel awkward. But Mikhail began to use the word like more and more often in relation to his companion, thereby expressing his growing admiration and affection. Accustomed only to ridicule, it was strange and alien for the beautiful maiden to hear compliments which sounded to her like something unimaginable and unusual. Confused, the girl timidly asked the ruler to wash her hands as quickly as possible, and finally take a break to enjoy the delicious snack she had been waiting for so long. The water in the lake was so crystal clear and transparent that plunging dirty hands into it seemed like a real crime, as if violating the sacred peace of impeccable beauty. However, while Leticia was wondering whether she should wash her hands first, the boy, without waiting for her decision and without wasting a minute, rushed into the water, joyfully having fun and enjoying the opportunity to swim. Woods screamed in fright, worried that the emperor might not have swimming skills, and this could cause a serious misfortune that would turn into an irreparable disaster. But it turned out that the guy was like a fish in water, gracefully gliding along the surface, confidently maneuvering and demonstrating amazing swimming skills that amazed with its ease and naturalness. Sighing with relief, the girl turned to him with a request, asking him not to play with his fragile nerves anymore and not to raise unnecessary worries. Suddenly there was a loud splash of water which shook the air and made everyone around pay attention. Leticia accidentally fell into the water, desperately covering her mouth with her hands and trying not to breathe, waiting in panic to break through to the surface and get rid of the terrible feeling of depression. The bottom was not visible under her feet, and her body seemed to be frozen in horror, creating the feeling that the depths had swallowed the baby, leaving her in fear and complete helplessness. No matter how hard Woods tried, she could not get out. The creature slipped further and further, and her arms and legs became lighter like weightless clouds getting lost in the depths. Falling down into the endless abyss, the lady humbly and with deep inner peace awaited her inevitable fate, accepting her fate and ready to face it with majestic calm. The young girl was brought back to reality by the voice of the prince, who, sounding enchanting and tender, called her by name, and this sound stream seemed to envelop the lady with its magical charm. Mikhail looked at her sadly with his big eyes. He was the same savior who pulled his companion out of the water and gave her a second life filled with hope and warmth. Referring to a strange and disturbing dream, Leticia calmly explained that she was fine. The reason for the concern was only the strong fright that she had recently experienced in the water. The exhausted girl, almost unaware of how tiredness had taken hold of her, sank onto the cold tiles and thought about how much the prince loved to walk around and indulge, not paying attention to the consequences of his pranks. Leticia was sincerely surprised by the lightness in her body, and the fact that while underwater, she did not get wet at all, as if an invisible protective layer surrounded the lady, creating a feeling of a magical space where the laws of physics do not apply. Suddenly, the boy extended his clean hands towards the lady, showing with a kind smile that now they could start eating, inviting her to enjoy the finished treat. With surprise, the lady also noticed that not only the boy's hands were clean, but his clothes also looked spotless, which testified to the magical power of water. And then she remembered about cleansing, a source that cleansed not only the body, but also the soul, recalling a deep spiritual cleansing that brought peace and harmony. But in the book, he was depicted as a beautiful girl who could appear in one of the corners of the imperial palace, embodying something mystical and mysterious. Raising her head, the girl met the gaze of the guy, shining with purity, and felt how his invisible energy filled the world with harmony and tranquility. Leticia knew that she looked strange asking the guy to move away for a while, but she couldn't help herself. The feelings and thoughts were too strong to handle. Pointing knowingly at his face, Mikhail said the word mirror, to which the girl hastened to assure him that everything was fine, she was just dizzy. The emperor extended his hand to the lady with the intention of helping and offering his support, demonstrating his readiness to provide her with assistance and attention at this moment. Looking at the boy incredulously, the little girl carefully clarified whether he was going to play a joke on her again. The look expressed obvious doubt about the guy's sincerity and intentions. Leading Woods to the lake, Mikhail explained that there was something unusual and mysterious associated with this lake, which made it stand out from all other bodies of water, attracting attention with its mystical properties and unique atmosphere. In the water, the baby saw her reflection, which, as if alive, seemed especially clear and meaningful, as if hiding something more. She was surprised to realize that despite all her past experiences and difficulties, she began to look much more beautiful and attractive than ever before, which was pleasant and unexpected. Moreover, Woods felt very uncomfortable under the gaze and piercing gaze that did not leave her and was constantly directed at her from Mikhail, causing a certain embarrassment. Hiding her knees, the lady turned to the guy with a request, asking him to stop looking at her with such an intent and piercing gaze, which only caused a feeling of awkwardness and discomfort. The boy hastened to reassure his companion again, complimenting her on her red hair and gently stroking her head to relieve tension and restore her confidence. Deciding to change the topic of conversation, Leticia suddenly remembered that it was time for lunch and suggested postponing all other conversations until this pleasant moment. Rising from her seat, she energetically rushed into the distance to complete all the preparations for dinner, carefully checking every detail and striving to make everything perfect for the upcoming meal. Having organized a picnic, Leticia urgently asked the guy not to hold back and eat as much as possible in order to enjoy every dish and make this moment truly enjoyable for both. The little girl laughed awkwardly, feeling a little embarrassed because it seemed to her that the prince was the only person in the world who gave away food so carefully and with such attention. According to Woods, Jorge was willing to give his own food to the heir, thereby demonstrating incredible generosity and unselfish concern for the future, even if it meant losing his own pleasure. Late in the evening, when there was silence, they returned to the castle, and the maiden suggested that they take a walk in the garden again the next day to enjoy the fresh air and the beauty of nature. Woods froze in surprise when the door in front of her nose suddenly opened by itself, as if under the influence of an invisible force, causing shock and a certain feeling of awe. The stranger was already waiting for them inside, and noticing their late return, he politely and coldly inquired why they returned so late again. In front of them stood a tall and stately man, with blonde, almost silver-colored hair and icy, impassive eyes that carefully and calmly studied the children, looking intently at them from top to bottom. Shielding the prince, Leticia inquired who this mysterious man was who stood before them with such a majestic and wary look. Arrogantly pushing the girl away, the aristocrat contemptuously refused to call himself a commoner, emphasizing his high origins and exclusivity. Woods fell to the floor, making a loud sound that startled the boy, causing him to instantly flinch in surprise and anxiety. Mikhail shifted from foot to foot in horror and anger, looking with anxiety and rage at either his unfortunate friend lying on the floor or the evil aristocrat standing in front of him with an arrogant expression on his face. Turning to the stranger, the boy angrily said the word table, but the significant man clearly did not understand what exactly he meant, and his face remained imperturbable and mysterious. Leticia hastened to clarify that the emperor was asking the name of the aristocrat in order to clarify the situation and avoid further misunderstandings. Demandingly, the boy repeated the word table, trying to convey to the stranger that this particular word had some important meaning in their conversation. The man decided to trust the servants and introduced himself as Marquis Howard Graham, guardian of the heir to the throne, thus emphasizing his high position and authority. All that remained was to reconcile and obey the instructions of the aristocrat, who was appointed by the emperor himself as the prince's guardian, realizing that his word was now of great importance. Mikhail did not show any signs of excitement. His face remained completely calm and emotionless despite the current situation. Trying to suck up to the boy, the man said that now he would help solve all the problems and worries of the ruler, offering his services as invaluable assistance in managing the situation. Leticia froze in horror at the mention of the word trinket, which, as it turned out, had a highly offensive meaning in this situation, causing her deep confusion and anxiety. The aristocrat, with obvious interest and impatience, inquired what exactly the prince wanted to express in his words. To this, the boy, remaining completely calm, repeated the curse with a clear shade of irritation and hostility, not caring about the consequences. Not taking the boy's words to heart, the man continued to insist that the prince could only trust him persistently, emphasizing his exceptional position and dedication to the cause. The conversation between the guys did not take place, since the adult did not understand the individual, unrelated words of the heir, which made their communication incomprehensible and difficult to understand. Leticia stood aside, realizing that the word moon was used by the boy to express a question about the reason for the aristocrat's appearance, which seemed to be incomprehensible to the adults and required clarification. An irritated, significant person ordered the emperor to stop talking nonsense, demonstrating his impatience and demanding more reasonable and constructive behavior from him. Leticia observed how the Marquis treated the boy like a child, prompting her to intervene in the situation to correct the misunderstanding and protect the young prince's dignity. Approaching closer and maintaining modesty, the girl quietly and politely explained that the emperor was interested in the reason for the appearance of the Marquis, trying to clarify the situation. Having received no answer to the question of why the word moon meant reason, the aristocrat disdainfully called the lady useless, demonstrating his dissatisfaction and disrespect. The man clearly recognized the authority of only the prince and wanted to hear something coherent and clear from him, completely ignoring all other attempts at explanation. As Leticia, trying to fulfill her duties as a translator, began to work in all seriousness, she was suddenly thrown to the floor by a sharp blow to the cheek, which left the lady in complete shock and confusion. Trembling with fright, the little girl, in complete panic, realized that she could not take a breath, and this feeling of airless depression enveloped her completely, depriving her of the ability to act and think clearly. Worried and anxious, the prince turned to his friend, expressing his deep concern for health and sincere concern for the well-being of this difficult moment. The aristocrat was not going to succumb to the witch's petty tricks and believe the translation of the boy's words, considering them only a cunning ploy for manipulation. With tears in her eyes and a heart full of bitterness and pain, Leticia listened to the rudeness directed at her, feeling every derogatory word like a sharp blade penetrating her fragile soul. The future emperor called his girlfriend by name, trying to convey all his respect and the special attitude that he felt towards her, as if every spoken word was imbued with deep sincerity. When the girl headed towards the exit, Mikhail hurried after her, breaking into a run, anxiously worried about his friend and worrying about every second of her potential danger. Involuntarily freezing in place, the boy felt how Woods uttering the order not to approach filled his voice with insistence and strict determination, which caused him inner anxiety and forced him to retreat. Leticia behaved in such a way that she understood that she should not contradict the Marquis so as not to arouse his suspicions and not create unnecessary problems. It was incomprehensible that even if Mikhail could not speak, the boy was still a child of 10 years old with his childish feelings and experiences. That is why it is unlikely that he could effectively resist his legal guardian, who had enough power to eliminate the heir, leaving behind only a bloody brooch as a symbol of his mercilessness. But immediately the girl was surrounded by the prince's words spoken with special insistence and deep feeling, as if each of them had been carefully constructed to penetrate into the very heart. The guy looked at his companion seriously before saying that he did not want to leave her and was determined to be there for her in any situation. From the shock that the boy uttered an entire phrase, the lady froze in place and turning to face him tried to comprehend every word as if trying to solve a riddle that had just been presented. Deciding that she had imagined it, Woods turned around and intended to continue on her way, trying not to dwell on trifles and not to succumb to doubts. However, Mikhail repeated those same words again, not wanting to let go of the only person he could completely trust and rely on in difficult situations. Suddenly, without the girl suspecting anything, the imposing figure of the aristocrat who had previously treated her with obvious disdain and arrogance appeared behind her, demonstrating his arrogance. In a cold and unyielding tone, the man ordered the maid to no longer attempt to be near the future emperor, making it clear that her presence in his circle was absolutely undesirable.